Hey guys, GWS here. To cover the debate between Kyle Kulinski and Razorfist, a debate that I did not watch. I didn't catch their live stream on Drunken Peasants. Um, the reason I just decided on the spot to kind of cover this debate is because I do a lot of talking about Kyle Kulinski, secular talk. I have a lot of secular bullshit episodes, if you will, and I just feel like I will, I'd be doing a disservice to my one or two people who watch my channel not cover this. So, first of all, I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I've done previous debates. Let me make sure my mic's working first. And it's not. Yeah, it is. It's working. I didn't think it was. Okay, anyhow. I'm going to do this a little bit different. I'm going to do this live, kind of on the spot stuff to kind of record myself, my comments, just so number one, I can have a better memory. I can do things more objectively, rather than doing as I did with the Politicon debates and just hashing. So this is going to be a live watch and response. And of course, this is on Drunken Peasants. Kyle Kulinski versus Razorfist. I don't know who Razorfist is, so there could be some bias, positive or negative. And before I start, I just like to let people know who haven't watched my channel, because I'll probably be posting this on Twitter, that I come at this from a center-right perspective. Center-right as referenced by this logo right here, this on the top right. According to this spectrum, I am center-right. That means that could mean different things on different spectrums to different people, different Overton windows, etc., different countries. But on this particular thing, and I'm not going to pull up the website. I'm sure you all recognize that graphic, the RBGP graph, I guess we'll call it. Referencing the colors. Anyhow, I'm going to full screen this and we're going to watch this debate. And I might stop it. I'll probably stop it often to make some comments. If I do any fact checking, this is going to be my rule for myself. If I do any fact checking on either party, it's going to be live fact checking. It's going to be based on my recollection for either one of them. I'm not going to shortchange either one of them, because here's the thing, and this is the important thing people have to understand about debates. And I know I'm kind of going on, but debates are not about your predispositions. It's about who has the better battle of ideas. You may not agree with somebody's ideas, and I'm probably going to agree with a lot of what Razorfist says. Okay, this just upgraded. It's my fantasy, comment. Fantasy football, folks. That's the joys of having a non-edited channel. Anyhow, lost my train of thought. So I'm probably going to end up agreeing with Razorfist a little bit more than Kyle, but here's the thing. Disposition should not have anything to do with who wins or loses a debate. For example, at Politicon, I declared that Anna Kasparian won the her versus Ann Coulter debate. I could not agree less with Anna Kasparian, but I felt like she did the overall net better job slightly, and I kind of and I think I even joked about it, like, Anna won by a nose. Okay, fake nose. Anyhow, we're gonna maximize this and we're gonna watch this, and I'm gonna try to be quiet. And we will pause for commentary as it goes. So here we go. Kyle Kulinski. This has started a little bit, by the way. Kyle started off posting or saying the definition of liberalism, and now Razorfist is getting into the definition of libertarianism. Where he's gone so far is he's basically defined government as use of force, implied use of force, using the whole and so we'll see if he gets into non-aggression, all that. So let's go ahead and play this, knowing that you should be able to watch this from here to know a lot of what's going to be said. So here we go. for the load.
Starts to blow me dawn to dusk. It ain't okay to point a gun in someone's face and forcibly compel them to do so. And make no mistake, that's the end result. If you don't pay taxes,
Yeah. Just one more thing. Sorry. He's referencing a Penn quote where he made a speech where he was talking about, where Penn said, "Would you have the government point a gun at you to force you to pay for someone else's health care? Hospital bills or whatever." So that's basically what he's referencing here. Okay, moving on.
pay your fine. Don't pay your fine, you have to pay your interest. Don't pay your interest, go to court. Don't go to court, bench warrant. Then the cops show up, and then you get to see the barrel of the gun. Charity is charity, philanthropy is philanthropy. Government is fundamentally force. And I've kind of racked my brain low these many months, for many an hour, to comprehend how the same slacktivist left that perpetuated the hands up, don't shoot fiction have any difficulty whatsoever discerning the fact that government is not only force, but all too often an utterly unmoderated application of it. So, yeah, that would be what I have to say on the subject of my opposition to modern progressivism.
All right, so I'm going to open it up to a more free-form discussion here, and just you guys.
Okay, good. I have a lot to say about that.
We'll start it off with Kyle, because I'm sure you take issue with some of the things that were said just now.
Oh yes. Okay, so that was about 4 or 5 minutes of denying the social contract, is what you just did. You're basically regurgitating the talking points that 14-year-olds spew after they read an Ayn Rand book. So, by saying, oh...
So, right off the bat, we have Kyle opening up with an ad hominem attack, which is really damaging. Now, when you're disparaging your opponent based on, when you're belittling just for the sake of belittling, that's not debate. And I think we can all agree with that. You should, at least give your opponent the intellectual benefit of the doubt. So we'll move on. We'll see if he responds to his actual points here. But, comments like that, they just don't belong in debates.
Oh, government is force. That's all it really comes down to. That's a gross oversimplification. And what you're basically doing is saying, well, it's all the same. It's all the same. So when the government does Medicare, for example, and saves the lives of people who need health care and are over the age of 65, when the government builds roads and bridges, when we have firefighters and police, what you're doing is you're saying, well, look, ultimately, at the end of the day, government equals force, so all that stuff I'm going to lump into the same basket and say it's useless, or it's not, doesn't fit in my ideology or my philosophy. But what I would submit to you is literally every single modern nation on the planet has a government, and the question is not, are we going to have government or not? Is it going to be an anarcho-capitalist society or not? The question is, what size government should we have? So in other words, if you want to debate what kind of tax rate we should have, how much the government should or shouldn't be involved in somebody's life, that's a legitimate debate. It is not at all a legitimate debate to try to pretend like these anarcho-capitalist talking points are a form of valid argument where you lump everything into the same basket and say government equals force, therefore let's just disregard it and pretend like we don't need it. Well, if you don't need it, you know what? Go ahead and move to the tundra in Siberia and let me know how that works out for you. And then before you know it, you'll be begging to come back to civilized society where, yes, we have government, and the question is, to what extent do we have government?
Now, first of all, you have a misrepresentation from Kyle right here. Like, when Razorfist made his comments, he didn't explain, he didn't say we should do without government. And Kyle's overreaching, and we'll see if Razorfist can pick up on this. But there's a big overreach. I don't think anybody's arguing here, at least I haven't heard Razorfist, we'll hear his response, that government is not necessary. The argument is that government is implied force. And I'm speaking to this because, I've made libertarian arguments, and this is the common response from the left, is that libertarians think government is bad, therefore we should not have government. And we'll see, because this is a classic um, argument response. Basically, this isn't just 14-year-old Ayn Rand stuff, Basically, any discussion between a liberal and a libertarian opens up this exact same way. So it's going to be curious to see which way this kind of branches out, because you can get anarchy arguments, minimalist arguments. You can go the Stefan Molyneux route. There's a lot of ways. So let's hear where this is going to go from here.
But here's the great irony. You argue for the social contract and argue that when the government saves someone's life, then that's a laudable experience. But by the same token, when someone dies due to inadequate health care from socialized medicine, which does happen in socialized medicine countries, which very nearly happens to people in countries with flat-out single-payer healthcare systems, where they wind up with healthcare complications due to exorbitant wait times over healthcare.
That's
It's funny
nonsense.
how that social contract
nonsense.
simply erodes and only works one way.
Well, that what you just said is bullshit. That's not true.
Moreover, I would argue further. I'm sorry. What isn't true?
What you said is not true. So first of all, every single country, like rationing is this big thing that people on the right like to point to. Oh my God, rationing healthcare and single payer systems. Every single country rations care. The question is, how do you ration it and how do you prioritize it? In the U.S., we do what's called a wallet biopsy. So the richer you are, the more likely you are to get good health care. In other countries, in single-payer countries, they ration based on need. So whoever needs the care gets the care. Waiting are for elective procedures. So yes, if you want a fucking chin surgery or you want something that's elective, you might have to wait a little bit. And you know what? That's totally fine, because the person who needs a gallbladder surgery right now is going to get that gallbladder surgery. And it's always hilarious to me when I listen to people like you talk about single-payer healthcare, and then you go and talk to somebody who lives in a single-payer system. It's night and day. They tell you, no, I love our system, and we think what you do is crazy. And by the way, while we're at it, allow me to say that 45,000 people die every year in the U.S. Because they don't have access to basic health care. That number in Canada and Norway and Denmark and Iceland and Sweden is 0.
Yeah, and that's invariably what you'll fall back on. But more people have access.
Because it's true.
Paper.
That's why I fall
That's
back on it,
lovely,
because it's accurate. What I'm saying is true.
Providing access is not the same thing as providing care. If
No,
you
I'm
increase
saying
the number
what
of people
is.
who have access to character, unless you have a magic Harry Potter wand to increase the number of doctors and nurses overnight in a system that no longer places ample incentives on actually becoming a doctor, well, congrats. All you did was give the entire nation access to interminable wait times. I mean, does it broaden coverage?
The people in
Sure.
Denmark disagree. The people in Canada disagree. The people in Norway disagree. Apparently, they have that magic Harry Potter wand because they're making it work right now, and our system is not working.
Which is actually not factual, because in 2013 alone in Canada, across all 12 major medical disciplines, average wait time swelled like an improperly diagnosed neck tumor from nearly 10 weeks to 18 and a half weeks. And I mentioned the improperly...
What did I just tell you? The wait times are for elective procedures. They're not.
Okay, first of all, Kyle is not. Listen, now the reason I'm not going in a lot of this is because you have a lot of unsubstantiated stuff, a lot of half-baked, misrepresented stuff, like the 45,000 thing. You know, like I read the Harvard study and they didn't attribute cause to that, but okay, you can debate that some of that is caused by lack of access. Like, that number is out there, and then but most of the stuff they're pointing out is not thing. But here's the thing, and Razorfist actually points out this distinction that liberals often do not make: the difference between access and care. Like, you can have, like, for example, in Venezuela, you have access to all kinds of health care, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it. Now you can have theoretically some universality in some care, and there are European nations who have similar survival rates to various diseases to the United States. It's that there's just a difference between access and actual care. You can give somebody access all they want, but it doesn't mean they're going to get care, and that's what Kyle's not getting. But the big thing I wanted to point out here is that Kyle Kulinski's just flat not listening to Razorfist here, because Razorfist brought up, you know, something pretty critical, like neck tumors. Now, I don't have the information to know whether what he's saying is true or not. 10 weeks to 18 weeks, I'd have to fact check that at a different time and see. But the fact is, whether he's right or wrong, Kyle is still sticking with the elective procedures. A neck tumor is not an elective procedure, Kyle. That's a pretty serious thing. You got a tumor, you know. But, and that's the thing. It's like, it doesn't seem like Kyle is interested in listening. It just seems like he's going, like he's saying every single modern nation, but there's not a lot of specifics involved in that. And so we're going to see if we can hear some more specifics from Kyle. But, synopsis this far is Kyle's not really doing a lot of debating here. Like, it's just a lot of, I don't know, like condescension from his tone and all that. So we'll hear what he has to say. Let's see if we can get something out of this.
Not for necessary procedures that you have to have right now.
And here's why I mentioned the improperly diagnosed neck tumor, because I can use an example that's actually very public and was very public on our format, YouTube. Prominent philosophy YouTuber Stefan Molyneux had a tumor on his neck.
Oh, yes, philosophy YouTuber, the very serious thinker Stefan Molyneux. Please continue.
That's so very relevant to this discussion.
You're the one that mentioned it.
They tell him, don't worry, it's benign. Wait 3 more months. Dude's sitting here with a shot put in his jaw. They're playing the smooth jazz music for him over the phone and asking him to please stand by for a quarter of a goddamn year. 10 months pass. He finally gets airfare to the States and gets it lanced off by one of our inferior American doctors, who, by the way, takes one look at it, says that shit ain't benign, and puts him on chemo treatments he should have been taking in Canada for the last year. Socialized medicine quite nearly killed the dude.
Okay, so ready? That's one example. You ready for my example? There's somebody named Bob, somebody named Steve, somebody named Jeff, somebody named Chris, somebody named Barbara, somebody named Susan. There are, and this is a Harvard study I'm quoting from. You ready? Quote, 45,000 people die every year from lack of health coverage. And furthermore, if you want to talk about...
It's called the Veterans Administration.
Wait. Do you want to talk about specific cases? Let's talk about specific cases. There was a woman... This is under our private health insurance system. You know how people love to say under Obamacare there are death panels? Guess what? They're right. There are death panels. They're called private insurance companies. Because what happens is they try to find any way possible to wiggle out of paying for your care. Because if you have a private health insurance system, you want to maximize profit as much as possible. That's the way it works. You're for profit, so hey, how do we make more money? Deny as much care as possible. So there was a woman who had skin cancer, and her insurance company said, we're not going to pay out on your claim. She's like, why? This doesn't make any sense. They said, well, we looked back into your past, and we found that you had acne. She's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So you're not going to pay for my skin treatment because I had acne? They go, well, you say it's acne. We say it was cancerous skin lesions and you had a pre-existing condition. So now we're not going to pay out. And guess what? She died. So you want to sit here and shoot anecdotes all day? We could shoot anecdotes all day. But honestly...
Kyle's actually incorrect about that case, too. She did not die. And I hope Razorfist points this out, because I'm going to point out, because Kyle did the story on it. She didn't die... At least from that, she went to St. Jude's to get treatment. And that was what the whole story was about. St. Jude's, a private charity. So let's move on.
I don't give a fuck about anecdotes, because anecdotes are anecdotes for a reason. They ignore the macro picture, and the macro picture is, from the Harvard study, not Kyle speaking here, the Harvard study, quote, 45,000 people die every year from lack of health coverage in the U.S. That does not exist in Canada or Norway or Sweden, no matter how many...
Okay, so we're going to look up that quote right here. So we're going to fact check this right here.
Shitty little story from the U.S.
Let's get that
quote,
exact quote.
45,000 people die every year from lack of health coverage in the U.S. That does...
45,000 people die every year from lack of health coverage in the U.S. If I could spell it right. Let's see if we can get that Harvard study. Okay, and let's see if we can, because here's the thing, and this is what I keep. Let's see. Let's copy this because I'll have to search for this exact quote. See, 45,000 deaths annually linked to lack of health coverage. And see, here's the thing. It's like they're having a live debate. So it's, this is part of the problem with debating is it's hard to live fact check unless you know of these studies. And, maybe Razorfist hasn't read these particular studies. I don't know how much he knows about Kyle. But, yeah, see, you see, because there's a difference between cause and link. And it's this word linked right here that we're looking at, because scientifically, when you say A causes B, it means that A has a direct relationship with B that causes B to occur, right? When you say A is linked with B, you're not saying A caused B, you're saying A has a relationship with B. So, for example, say if delta A, then B may be the same, scientifically speaking. That is to say, if A occurs, that does not mean B is going to occur. The state of A does not directly impact the state of B. It is just a link. So, for example, the link can be caused by a few things. Like, for example, when you say A is linked with B, it could be B causes A, right? Or you could say C causes both A and B, and they just happen to be in a correlative state. Or you can say that A is disjointed from B, and we're basically saying it's just a coincidence. So when you say linked versus caused, and one argument I'll give Kyle on this is that scientifically you don't see a lot of causal relationships shown. What you'll see correlations like this, and then they kind of leave people to read that as cause or not cause, because in science it's very difficult to prove correlation versus causation. It's easy to prove a correlation, but it's more difficult to prove causation, because you have to isolate all the other elements. You have to deduce every possible other potential cause. But see, here's the thing, is Kyle is counting on the readers, the listeners to the drunken peasants, not actually reading the study. And this is what the study says: 45,000 deaths annually linked. And this is what I really wanted to get at. See, I knew this number was going to come out. That's why I said I might live fact check if I have to, if I have the information. Because you see these numbers thrown around, and it's not true. So let's move on with this.
Does not exist in Canada or Norway or Sweden, no matter how many shitty little stories you come up with to try to pretend like single-payer systems are monstrous when they're actually objectively.
I don't have to pretend they are, because we already have. We in the United States, we don't have to.
Hold on, we're going to be able to revisit this subject
okay.
later on. There is a question dealing with this, so you'll have your chance to discuss this more in depth later on. For now, I want to turn it over to Razorfist for 5 minutes to basically the total reverse of the question I gave Kyle at the beginning, just to define your personal definition of what it means to be a conservative, how and why that you feel is the best lens through which to view the world. And if you have any problems with the term conservative or something, you just let me know, and you can just apply whatever term you want to it. All right, I'm going to give you a mark and go.
Yeah, conservative government is easy to quantify for all Kyle's pretense to anarcho-capitalism or whatever helpful little straw man he decided to erect there so he could easily fell. I argue for a government that is just big enough that we have a military for defense, viable borders, police, and oceans that aren't composed of 80% antifreeze, while keeping the government small enough that it can't seize your personal property, force you to engage or disengage from private commerce, doesn't print currency until it's outstripped in value by Mallow Cup money, and to the civil libertarians among us, isn't so intrusive or overbearing that it can tell Dick and Lance they aren't allowed to have butt sex babies. It's a form of government that, at the end of the day, rather than telling you what you are supposed to do allows you to live your life, steps back a bit, and doesn't overstep its purview except when absolutely necessary. It's no accident the more socialist our government policies get, the less social our communities actually become as we replace the community and the civic process with the state.
And I'm gonna give a little bit of fairness to Kyle, and that is that, like, I'm not sure 100% his definition of social, but I'm assuming he means togetherness as social. But a lot of stuff has happened in the decades, and you can't even relate cause and effect to more socialist government versus less social lives. You can't do that, and this is, it's just a problem with really both sides. I should have brought it up before, is that people are all too quick to refer to correlations as absolute causes, and this is where I think we get into muddy waters when we get into debates. Is we attribute correlation to causation, and we use them interchangeably too much, and this is what kills so many debates, because you get into these muddy waters, and then you start getting into battles of semantics, and then all of a sudden you're not really battling ideas because you are confused about the logical stuff. That's why you really got to be careful not to use these fallacies. And right now we've seen both of them kind of, devolve into this fallacious kind of thinking. Even though I agree with Razorfist, but this kind of thinking is not good for a debate. Let me just put it that way. Let's move on.
That would be my argument for what conservative is. And I would further argue conservative is somewhat of a misnomer. I think one of the reasons conservatism fell by the wayside for a while there, it's somewhat resurgent at present, but one of the reasons it fell by the wayside is because we allowed the language to be handed over to the left. We allowed the left to refer to themselves as progressive for employing 100-year-old ideas of socialism, which there's nothing progressive about that. If you look at the root word progressive, it's to progress, to look to the new horizon, something that's never been implemented. Socialism's been tried before. If you want to get really technical about forms of government that have never truly been tried, it's a form of government that puts the power squarely in the hands of the people and steps back and lets them live their lives.
Okay, so Kyle, you have up to 5 minutes to respond to that.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about that other than to point out that, of course, I was not strawmanning. You're the one who brought up about how all government is force, and I'm simply relaying the fact that that is the main argument that they make in anarcho-capitalist circles. So that's where that came from. Second of all,
it's the main argument they bring up in a lot of circles, Kyle. Government is force is a broad-ranging libertarian argument. It's not just anarcho-capitalists. There are a wide range of libertarians in this country. Libertarian does not mean anarcho-capitalist. It does not even mean minimalist. You could say government is force and say, okay, government is force, but it's necessary, right? So just because you're using that broad range argument, it does not, just because X makes an argument does not mean only X makes that argument. And so that's, just take it for what it was, Kyle. You were presenting a strawman argument, and he wins decisively on that point because that's what you were doing. When you label somebody something that somebody is not, and he identified his position, by the way, because in his in his argument right there, you were just there listening to it like 2 minutes ago. He basically defined his thing kind of like a minimalist. I don't know if he was saying totally minimalist, because apparently he believes in some environmental protection, but he's around the minimalist sphere of libertarian thinking, that i.e. a government only as big as absolutely necessary. And there's a lot of minimalists out there. That's not the same as anarcho-capitalism. Minimalists believe in a government. So let's move on.
Modern conservatism, if you talk about modern conservatism in the context of today's Republican Party, it's basically an off-the-spectrum party in that it's full of complete wanton corporatists. Now, by the way, to be clear, that's not me saying that the Democrats are not also gigantic corporatists, because they are. It's just a matter of degrees here. But the Republicans are giant corporatists, totally.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Let me just finish this real quick. This won't take long. So totally beholden to their Wall Street donors, big oil donors. You go down the list, and then there's also a hefty dose of Christian fundamentalism and social conservatism in there. If you look at the new movement conservatism, people like Steve Bannon, and of course Roy Moore is the new one, the Alabama Senate GOP candidate. I mean, it's basically comical. You have Christian fundamentalists who Roy Moore's a guy who argued that homosexuality should be illegal. So I find it interesting that you mentioned how on social issues you consider yourself pretty libertarian. Well, that's certainly out of lockstep with the Republican Party and the direction that they've been going in.
It's interesting.
All right, I'm going to just open this up for a little free-form discussion between you two guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're all that in opposition here in terms of definitions. Look, one of the most, and I think probably the most prominent politician to come out the earliest for both gay marriage and gays in the military was actually a Republican. It was Barry Goldwater, Mr. Conservative. So it's not completely out of step with the Republican platform. It's just out of step with what the neocon platform became. The Reaganites, the Pat Robertson Brigade, and so forth.
Would you deny that that's the more vehement strain in the party today?
I think that's definitely changed with Trump, who's holding a rainbow flag on stage. I think there's certainly been a paradigm shift there.
But also picking Mike Pence as his VP.
I'm sorry, what?
But also picking Mike Pence as his VP, whose claim to fame before he was picked to be VP was that he signed an anti-gay bill in Indiana, which made it so that businesses are legally allowed to discriminate against gay people.
Yeah, as a conciliatory gesture to the neocon wing, and we can go on and on with that. But you understand what I mean? Like Trump himself holding rainbow flags on stage, having publicly expressed support for George Michael's wedding the same year that Hillary Clinton came out and said marriage is between one man and one woman. That was 2005, I believe. He's clearly not the same, cut from the same cloth as the Mike Pences and the Paul Ryans.
Well, I agree with that, but I don't think he has much of an ideology to begin with. I think he's totally unmoored and totally vapid, but that's a separate conversation. My point is, the majority of elected Republicans are not Rand Paul. They're not liberal on social issues. They're decidedly the opposite.
That's beginning to change already. You just saw Jeff Flake resign.
Okay, but it's right now. I'm talking right now.
But in any political group, you're going to wind up. I mean, I severely doubt you would like to be closely identified with the John Podestas and Hillary Clintons. There's different wings of each party.
I'm loudly and aggressively on the record saying, number one, they are the dominant strain in the Democratic Party, which is why I'm trying to fucking purge it with Justice Democrats. That's point number one. But point number two is, why are you tap dancing around it? Just admit it. The majority of the Republican Party are socially conservative, backwards Neanderthals.
I wasn't tap dancing around it. I'm more than happy to admit that the neocons took over the party, and that obviously triggered a massive shift in the party. However, by the same token, I just said, unlike the Democrats, there's actually a shift in the opposite direction.
Okay, but then we get into what is rhetoric versus what is reality. I would submit to you that Rand Paul is the only person who's actually left or libertarian on social issues, whereas virtually everybody else in the Republican Party, including Trump, because I don't give a fuck what Trump says. What matters to me are his policies and his actions. And he just recently signed a religious liberty executive order. So this is one of those things where, yeah, he can hold an LGBTQ flag all day long, but that doesn't mean dick at the end of the day when he's picking Mike Pence for VP and he's signing every single bill that Pat Robertson and John Hagee wants him to sign.
You'd be surprised at how many Republicans are liberal on social issues. I don't even like John McCain, and we all know his stance on civil unions and so forth because of his daughter.
Civil unions is a joke. It's like the fucking halfway point on an issue where there is no halfway point. Either you're for gay marriage or you're against it.
And I agree on that issue. I completely agree. Look, I'm from more of the Rand Paul wing, so you're really preaching to the choir here.
Good. Well, then we're going to get along a lot more than I thought we would.
There you go. Well, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted you two guys to have this discussion is because you're both, I wouldn't say fringe, but I would say you kind of are both representative of the younger demographics of these parties at this point, and maybe sort of a glimpse of where things are headed in the future.
But I don't see. I don't see an equivalence though, because I really do think that the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party, the elected Republicans, are backwards on social issues. Whereas I think it's a fair point to say the majority of young Republicans, like millennial Republicans, might be reasonable and more agree with Rand Paul on these issues. But in terms of elected Republicans, we're talking well over 90% of them are still 100% wrong on these issues.
Which I think is an artifact of the fact that they were in power for so long as a repudiative gesture against Obama as his popularity began to fall. After 2010 when he was...
Yeah, just kind of, I just want to step in here, and that is really, I do gotta say Kyle's correct on one thing, and that is that I think Razorfist is doing a little bit of a tap dance here, because, yeah, like, most Republicans are socially conservative. They're not, for gay marriage and all that. It's like, it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but I mean, he really should stop pretending that, Republicans are moderate. Like, Democrats are, at least Kyle's admitting his party's idiotic. He's not admitting to the extent. But yeah, we'll move on. But I really wish they just get beyond this politics crap, because it's kind of meaningless to the whole debate as a whole. And I might even skip over it if they keep going through it, because it's just, I don't even know why they asked this question, to be honest. It's just, they should have just gotten the issues. But okay, let's move on.
Blown out in the midterms. There were a bunch of Republicans rushed into Congress, and it was like the people would vote for anything with an R next to its name because they were so pissed about Obamacare. So I think we're kind of stuck with a lot of artifacts from that period. And so, look, it's going to be a slow transformative process if it happens at all.
All right.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I have you guys kind of were touching upon the Donald Trump phenomenon. Now, obviously, Razor, you've made some videos supporting Donald Trump and his presidency.
Yeah.
You
still.
Absolutely.
So the question that I'm going to pose to both of you, and it's going to be posed to Razor first, is Donald Trump a good president? And you can begin now.
In order to make that statement, you have to have a metric for it. In recent memory, the only thing I can go off of is from Obama to Bush Senior. A president is considered successful, air quotes, if of the half dozen LSD-fueled pipe dreams they pitched to the plebs during the general election, they're able to implement at least one. That appears to be the criteria. I wouldn't piss on Obama. I wouldn't piss on Obama to extinguish a fire, but I do believe, looking at it objectively, history may record him as an effective executive, because while he didn't close Guantanamo, and he certainly didn't end any wars.
Try not to interrupt, Kyle. Sorry.
I'm laughing. I'm not interrupting, dude.
No, look. While he didn't close Guantanamo and he didn't end any wars in the Middle East, if anything, quite the opposite. He was able to fulfill two major campaign promises. He pushed through Obamacare, and he croaked Bin Laden. Period. Like, applying this metric, you'll find it largely unchanged over the last quarter century. If the president was able to fulfill one or two of his major campaign promises, and obviously there's going to be other things sprinkled on top, well, the media throws him a parade. He's largely considered a success, which is why someone's going to have to explain to me how in the first 10 months of his first term, Trump can institute the 5-year lobbying ban on politicians he promised, institute the overruled on fight, win, and reinstitute the Middle East travel ban he promised, pull out of the TPP like he promised, institute the federal hiring freeze like he promised, appoint a conservative replacement for Justice Scalia like he promised, set aside money for and begin erecting prototypes of the fucking wall like he promised.
I thought you're socially liberal.
And be confused even in passing with a failure. I mean, just this past week, he He unsealed the JFK assassination files, which wasn't even a campaign promise. It was literally just an offhanded reference he made on a radio show.
They were scheduled to be released. Jesus, you get so diverted by any tweet, you think it's like gospel.
1 second, Kyle. You gotta wait.
The bottom line is this cat has kept more promises in 10 months than Obama broke over the course of 8 years. That you find these actions objectionable is immaterial. I and many others found Obamacare objectionable enough that he lost his majority in Congress months after its passage. Look, he's still a success, albeit a middling one, because he followed through on at least 2 of his major promises. And by the left's own metric, so is Trump. That isn't to say he's even almost perfect. I myself recorded a scathing invective about his ass-backward intervention into Syria, and I stand by it. His position on DACA had me scratching my head until he pulled a pretty masterful parry at the end, actually, and got it shot down in Congress. And he hasn't yet overturned Obamacare, largely due to Judas goats in his own party, like John McCain, for example. But he just teamed with Rand Paul to draft an alternate solution. And whatever you think of Paul's politics, I can think of worse people to team with on the subject of healthcare than a fucking eyeball surgeon. I mean, call me crazy. I'm not over the moon about taking healthcare advice from Nancy Pelosi, the same woman who gave a green light to that facelift. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about Trump. I'm eminently pleased.
Okay, good. My turn.
Right, hold on. So Kyle, he went for 3 minutes and 14 seconds.
Right.
You have 5 minutes to rebut. I would like to remind both of our debaters to try to refrain from interrupting during the non-freeform sections.
Well, sometimes you can't help it. Okay, number one.
But here you go.
You mentioned Neil Gorsuch as a victory for Trump just after we had the conversation about how you're socially liberal. By your own standard, that's not a victory. So that's a weird thing to say. Number two, the JF...
Well, first of all, Kyle, I don't think he was saying he was for everything. I think he was saying he keeps campaign promises, and what he was asked for is if Trump was successful, and his metric of success is how many of your campaign promises have you kept? And clearly he's naming promises that he's kept. Now, it's kind of true that he's kind of implying approval and disapproval along the way, and we're going to see how he responds to this, which is going to be interesting. But the fact is, that's not really part of the question. But let's just hear what Kyle has to say.
Okay, thing again, this is so silly because, yes, it was scheduled to be released, and he was like, yeah, okay, go ahead. But then he goes on Twitter and takes credit for it, and everybody's like, oh yeah, you gotta give him credit. No, you don't have to give him credit. He was taking credit for something that was scheduled to be released. Now, to the broader question, is Trump a good president? The answer is decidedly fuck no, and it's not even close. Let's go through some of the things that he's done. Number one, he signed a bill that gutted internet privacy rights. This is something that's not talked about nearly enough. It's a bill that literally 6% of the American people supported. Every single Republican politician voted in favor of gutting internet privacy rights. And what it does is it makes it so that anytime you put your information online into a site, they now have the legal authority to take your information and sell it to whoever the fuck they want to sell it to. Whereas in the past, they couldn't do that. They needed to get your permission. That's point number one. Point number two, he picked...
I believe he's also wrong on that point. And, I'm going to break my rule about fact-checking because I don't want to go through looking for the video where he reported this. But I believe in the video he did it wasn't normal websites. It was ISPs to be able to share your information with other people. Because if you put your name on your website, nothing about that was illegal before that bill was signed. This was about ISPs and the right of ISPs to share your information with other people, whether you agree with it or not. And, this is just starting to become a pattern with Kyle, and I'm really not trying to harp on him. I'm really trying to be objective with this, and, I'll admit, yeah, I'm coming at this from a slightly right-leaning slant, and I do agree with a lot of what Razorfist says. I'm just going to state that up front. I agree on a personal level. Like on a debate level, it's kind of neutral, and if basically, if you find stuff that Razorfist said that is not true, that I should have obviously pointed out, then let me know in the comments. But here's the thing I'm just noticing about Kyle is that he's getting these slight misrepresentations where it's just like, I don't know if he's purposefully doing it or he's counting on the ignorance of his audience in Razor and in Drunken Peasants. And this is just, it's becoming a huge problem because he's misrepresenting even his own stories. Like when he said the girl died. No, she went to St. Jude's to get treated. And it's just ridiculous. So let's move on.
Pick Ajit Pai to lead the FCC. Ajit Pai's main goal is gutting net neutrality. Number 3, he did gut Obamacare. I don't know why you sold him short on that one. He indeed did gut Obamacare. He proposed Trump Care, which, by the way, had a 12% approval rating. What a winner he is. According to the CBO, with just his recent executive orders on Obamacare, 1 million more people are going to lose health insurance. Premiums are going to rise by 20%. They eliminate the protection for pre-existing conditions because they make it optional on a state-by-state basis. And what's going to happen is half the states, the red states, are going to say, we don't believe in protecting people with pre-existing conditions. His tax plan, when the CBO crunched the numbers on that, it gives everybody who's poor a $40 tax cut, gives everybody in the top 0.2% $940,000. Wow. He wants to eliminate the estate tax. That's another one that's, I'm sure you agree with him on that one, so I don't know why you didn't count that in his victories. But, of course, the estate tax also only applies to 0.2% of Americans. It's for people who make over $5 million or have over $5 million. Now, in terms of free speech, an issue, TJ, I know you care desperately about, Trump suggested making flag burning illegal. That's deeply against the First Amendment. He suggested delicensing news outlets that put out stories he doesn't like. That's another thing that's deeply against the First Amendment. And I don't even know what that means, by the way. I don't know what the fuck he was thinking he could even do on that front, unless he thinks he's some sort of a dictator. He increased drone strikes by 432%. Obama was terrible already with drone strikes. Trump increased them by 432%. This is something that, again, you as a more libertarian-leaning person should probably absolutely despise.
And just another one of these things, and this is really kind of a problem with Kyle's presentation style itself, because he repeats these numbers a lot on his shows for those of you who do not watch his show. But I'd really like to hear some references attached to these numbers more, because a lot of them, it's like, even watching his show, I don't know where all these numbers come from. I know where some of them come from, like the 45,000. I knew right off the bat because a lot of people cite it. But the 432%, like, where's he getting that number? And I just have a feeling that, well, I'm not even going to speculate on it. But the fact is, he needs to really be citing where these numbers come from. It's like Razorfist isn't providing a lot of raw numbers. He's more going into theoretical, logical arguments. But it's like, well, I think the couple he cited didn't really have references either. But it's like Kyle's he throws numbers out there, and this is how he does it. He throws numbers out there. He doesn't provide references, and sometimes it's really hard to come up with those numbers. And I just like to see, in a debate, if you're going to go on a gish gallop, at least cite your sources a little bit better so that you could be vetted by your opponent. So let's move on.
He picked Jeff Sessions for Attorney General. This is another guy who's socially backwards and who's doubling down on the drug war. He escalated in Afghanistan. He escalated in Syria. He escalated in Iraq. His very first military raid as president killed an 8-year-old American girl. Her name was Nawar al-Awlaki. And, of course, he pulled us out of the Iran deal, which makes it much, much more likely that Iran gets a nuclear weapon. And I could go on, but I'll leave it there because I've probably filled up all my time.
You actually have 2.5 minutes left if you want.
Okay, step aside. First day in office, he reversed a middle-class tax cut. He literally reversed a middle-class tax cut for mortgage insurance premiums. He's doing a $110 billion Saudi Arabia weapons deal, which proves that he's an establishment bitch boy who's doing what every single president before him did. He picked a predatory payday lender to be the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He littered his administration with Goldman Sachs lackeys, including Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn. Gary Cohn, by the way, got a $285 million exit bonus when he left Goldman Sachs. And look at that, he's pushing for privatization of our infrastructure, and Goldman Sachs gets to be the beneficiary. Trump increased military spending by $80 billion. And even on the things that I would agree with you that he did good on, like killing TPP, I originally gave him credit for that. Guess what? I was a chump. I was a sucker. Because what happened is during the renegotiation of NAFTA, they're now slipping in provisions from the TPP. And I'll wrap it up with that.
Okay, first of all, I already know where that one came out because I was thinking. Kyle got that from, I can't remember which media article it was, but it was from the media. And see, this is the problem I was going to talk about with Kyle, and that is that a lot of this information is likely coming from, and that one 100% is coming from, and you can watch this video on it, where he accuses Trump of trying to inject TPP provisions such as loss of sovereignty using international courts. He was trying to do that to Trump based on just an article in the media naming an unnamed source. And this is the problem we run into, is that, like when you're in a debate, you can't check all these numbers. And it's really problematic to debate like this. But let's move on. Let's hear what Razorfist has to say.
I didn't even mention North Korea.
Right.
About to go to war.
I actually had this slated to go after your initial 5-minute comments to go 2 minutes each. But I think I'm just going to continue with the trend of opening it up for open discussion after you've each had your say. And I'll go ahead, and since there's a lot to unpack there, I'll let Razor take a crack at what you just had to say.
Yeah, that's a lot of information at once. First off, a lot of that is subjective. Hey, I'm on the left and I don't like what he did stuff. Some of it is just part of his agenda that you don't like. Oh, congratulations, you're not really his market. It doesn't.
I'm with over 90% of Americans.
However,
according to the poll.
describing people like, Stephen Mnuchin has issues of his own, but you're talking about Goldman Sachs lackey. The guy ran a burger restaurant. Like, what are you? It's absolutely absurd.
And he was the head of One West Bank and worked for Goldman Sachs, so he's a Wall Street insider, and he's doing their bidding.
And anyone who is corporate could be described as a Wall Street insider. This is the problem.
You're defending Goldman.
The
Thank
idea
you. Keep
that
going.
you're not. I'm sorry. What?
Keep defending Goldman Sachs. This is fun.
No. What I'm saying is this guy, at the end of the day, has to put together an administration. Goldman Sachs insiders. I'm sorry?
I said of Goldman Sachs insiders, apparently, after he spent the whole campaign trail going after Hillary Clinton for her connection to Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. And by the way, he was right about that. But then he turns around and does the same fucking thing, and it's called hypocrisy. And it's called him being an establishment bitch.
No, it's called putting together your administration, and unfortunately having.
Would you say that if Hillary did that?
Pieces.
If Hillary Goldman Sachs people
I've talked about. No, look, I recorded an entire video about how Trump's cabinet could go either way, and as you've seen with the large turnover, there's some clear teething issues in appointing the correct names and faces to the correct positions. And I agree. Like a lot of these faces and names are on. As soon as I heard Sessions, I was not pleased at all. As soon as I heard, I'm trying to think of some of the other names, but Mnuchin I wasn't over the moon about, actually, who I just mentioned to you, and whose name I also cannot pronounce properly. But, there's a lot of people within his administration that I'm not over the moon about, and fortunately a lot of them appear to be shit-canned as of now. So I'm not sure why you would even necessarily mention that. You have to understand, like, at the beginning he had people from he had Romney advising him on who was going to be in his cabinet and so forth. This was clearly a lot of his cabinet, unfortunately, in the beginning were conciliatory picks for the neocons. Because at the end of the day, he was trying to unite his party. He's made this mistake before, by the way, in the primary when he, instead of standing his ground and standing in opposition to Rand Paul and John McCain, he gave kind of a last-minute endorsement so that he could get their endorsement in kind, and then they just wound up sticking the knife in anyway. He's been rife with this. Look, this is a non-politician. He went from civilian, albeit a popular one, to president of the United States in less than a year. He's not stupid, but he's also not a politician. And there's clearly going to be teething issues, and there clearly have been with his cabinet in general. But yeah, I don't understand why you would even Goldman Sachs insiders swing a dead cat and don't hit a Goldman Sachs insider in Washington D.C.
Oh,
like I dare you.
Please, you don't even believe that.
No, much less
so
on the Republican side.
That's so silly to say that. Like, obviously.
So, a lot of this, what do I make of this? Well, this exchange is more like, if you're not a fan of Trump, then, oh, he is an establishment bitch, excuse my language, that quote from Kyle, and then, but you also have Razorfist kind of doing some, like, excuse, well, he doesn't know what he's doing, this is his first year, it's like, not a lot of factual stuff. It's like, if you're into Trump, then you're going to be disposed to making more of those excuses. If you're against Trump, then you're going to go the Kyle route. My personal opinion is, like, I don't make anything of it. Like, to me, it's about results. And really, they're not discussing results, even though this is about whether Trump's been successful or not. They're debating his cabinet, for Pete's sake. Kyle went through a list of things he thought Trump didn't do well, and Razorfist went through a list of things that Trump has been successful at. And so it's like, there's no exchange over whether, those things are good and bad. And Razorfist is sitting here saying, oh, that's left-wing points. Debate him on it. That's what this is for. Like, you're on the left, so you believe this. Well, of course. That's what a debate is, Razorfist. You have to go after him. If he's going on a Gish Gallop, Kyle did go on a Gish Gallop there. The way you handle a Gish Gallop is, yeah, you start off with, you said, okay, yeah, you point out a lot of stuff. I can't refute all this in this debate, but here are a few key ones that I want to do, and then choose X, Y, and Z, like why you're going to, and then choose that as your defense ground, okay? And then that's where you want. Kyle pretty much doing the same thing, and except for Kyle did kind of contest them more, saying, you call yourself a libertarian, you call yourself socially liberal, yet you believe in, this, and, I haven't really seen a response. So, thus far, it's, I'd say Kyle's kind of getting the upper hand in this specific part of the debate. The first one, I'm not barely even going to consider part of it, so, the total to this point is Kyle ahead slightly, because he did slightly contest Razorfist here. So let's move on. See if Razorfist can come back a little bit.
He picked Goldman Sachs insiders for a fucking reason, because
he fired them for a fucking reason.
To the he didn't fire Mnuchin and Cohen. I don't know why you keep saying that. They're still in the administration.
Yes, but several others have been. And several other Goldman Sachs insiders.
We're talking about Mnuchin and Cohen. I don't give a fuck if he fired Bob, who did something else. I'm talking about Mnuchin and Cohen, Goldman Sachs lackeys who, yes, are doing the bidding of Goldman Sachs. I just told you they're working on privatizing our infrastructure and letting Goldman Sachs be the beneficiary. And it's not a fucking coincidence that Gary Cohn took a gigantic over $200 million exit bonus, and then now he's doing that.
Hold on. What is privatizing our infrastructure? Name a road that wasn't built by a private company with government grants.
Have you heard of the New Deal?
The railroad system. Have you? I mean,
that was, I gotta say, that was priceless. Kyle got rendered completely speechless there. I know it sounds kind of like cheerleading, but that was pretty huge from Razorfist.
Have you heard of the? I mean,
wait. Are you denying that we have public roads that can be privatized? Are you denying that?
No, we have public roads what I just said is private companies are contracted by the government to do these things, correct?
But they don't own them. They don't own them.
That isn't material. That isn't
material because Goldman is going to own them. That's the point. That's what they're working on right now.
That's what
that is also not true, because I watched the very video from Kyle that said this. And I know we're getting into things where, like, I'm getting on the Kyle, and, granted, I haven't watched much of Razorfist's material, so I can't say if he's contradicting himself or he's um, going against, anything, any material he's shown in his videos. I do got to give Kyle the you know, like I don't know Razorfist basically. I know Kyle, and they did the video on this, and that wasn't what the story was about. you know, praise the Lord for having a good memory, but it's like what Kyle is reporting on is Goldman Sachs builds the infrastructure. The government um, contracts Goldman Sachs, but they don't own it. They're contracted to build it. That was the whole thing. They don't own the road. They don't own the buildings. They don't own the pipes. They don't own the various things that infrastructure is going on. And just just many instances of Kyle misrepresenting himself. And this is like, I don't like to score debates based on people doing this, and I don't like the fact that I know Kyle a lot more than I know Razor. But when you have somebody misrepresenting their own content as often as they've done it, as consistently as they've done it, misrepresenting studies, it's very hard to not let that be part of scoring who the winner is. Um, Now, on the non-stuff, I'd actually say it's kind of even now because, that was a good point last time that Razor made up. It's not even, but just these misrepresentations, they're just awful. You know, like, debate, honestly, don't debate to win a debate. Debate to discuss. And I think that's part of the difference between them is that Kyle's debating to win a debate. Razor is debating to have a discussion. And whether or not Razor wins or not, it's just like, and he's not perfect either. He's being a little bit lazy with his language, his logic. He's kind of, they're both kind of fluttering all over the place, but he's not helping matters. But it's just, you want to debate things to discuss, to weed out differences, not to like you're going into a boxing match, and that's part of the problem. So let's listen in some more.
Okay, so you're saying Goldman Sachs will own the roads?
No, not all of the roads. Don't be a pithy idiot. You know what I'm saying. Certain roads, yes, they're trying to sell off parts of the infrastructure and have Goldman own them. And that is happening because Gary Cohn took a tremendous exit bonus, and now he's one of Trump's top officials. And Trump is doing the bidding of the establishment just like he said he wouldn't do. So that's why this is all relevant. It's not, oh, wow, look at poor Trump. It's hard to pick the right people. No, it's Trump is actively trying to do the bidding of the establishment because he's their bitch. He is an insider. He's not an outsider. He's an insider. He is Hillary Clinton.
No, he's such an insider that he was out-donated by Hillary. What, 700 million was the final count?
No. You're not going to get me to defend Hillary, sweetheart. You're not going to get me to defend Hillary. But,
what I'm saying is
you're trying to deflect from the problems with Trump.
No, what I'm saying is if he was in fact an insider, he wouldn't be continuing to be fought tooth and nail. Because, look, CNN is owned by a corporation. NBC is owned by a corporation. ABC is owned by a corporation. I believe we can come to the middle and agree they're not exactly painting the most flattering portrait of Donald Trump at present. These corporations have agendas, and these corporations are clearly not beholden to Donald Trump. You understand this, right? It would be curious tactics if he were taking a bunch of money from, for example, Disney, who has no small amount of connections to Goldman Sachs themselves. And in turn was turning around and being bashed by the news organization that's owned by Disney, which is ABC. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. So Donald Trump, if we want to, we can sit here and talk about Hillary Clinton's problems and how she is the establishment because she is, and all the donations that she took. Donald Trump, it was a complete and utter lie when he said, I'm self-financing my campaign. That is demonstrably untrue. But furthermore, even if it wasn't true, even if it was true, guess what? He's in over $100 million of personal debt, mostly held on Wall Street. You don't think they hold that over his head to get what the fuck they want? Of course they do. So you trying to pretend like he's not an insider is preposterous.
Well, first off, that's actually incorrect. He was
That's
self-funded.
accurate, 100%.
He was self-funded through the primary, and then in the main campaign, as he always said he would. I mean, he said as early as June 2016, or no, even before that, like April 2016, that if it progressed to the general election stage.
All right, live fact check time. So we actually have this data right here. I already know the answer to this, but I just like to share this with all the drunken peasants people here. So let's search. So you can search this on Open Secrets, right? You go, this will be 2016 cycle. This was, this might include the primaries. I'm not sure. Let's see if it's gonna, let's see. See if it'll show self-financed. Okay, here we go. Now, this is, and yeah, all the self-financing was during the primaries, I believe. So, just take me at my word on that one, because I promise you I'm right. And you can look up, but just search Open Secrets Donald Trump, and you can verify this information yourself. And here it is, candidate self-finance. And now the problem with this discussion I have is that one side says he was self-financed, the other side said he wasn't. And there's a big interpretation problem because, okay, if you say, I self-financed my campaign, does that mean you self-financed 100%? Or does it mean you self-financed any percent? Clearly, he did self-finance some. So it's like, where you are just depends on semantics, and that's where they're having their problems. And I think Razorfist is even trying to give Kyle the benefit of the doubt, like saying, okay, he did this during the primary, but he didn't donate any money to his normal campaign in the general election. And I don't think Kyle legitimately understands that there was that what he's talking about is there was some self-financing. So let's continue.
That he would then accept donations, right? But the primary was completely self-funded. That is just an incongruity that people attempt to manufacture.
First of all, can we get a fact check on that, number one? And number two, even if you're correct, the fact that he turned around on a key part of his campaign, the fact that his whole point was, I'm not beholden to the establishment because I'm not taking contributions, and then he starts taking contributions. For fuck's sake, there was the guy who's the head of Johnson & Johnson, was a top donor to Jeb Bush. Trump said repeatedly during the primary, is Jeb a puppet to this guy? I think he's a puppet. He's taking money from this gentleman here. I think he's a puppet. Not only did that guy become a Trump donor in the general election, Trump appointed him to be the head of his fundraising. So that is nothing but sheer hypocrisy.
That is, and you also don't seem to understand how Trump's fundraising worked in the general election. The RNC and Trump had separate. No, the RNC and Trump had separate fundraising apparatuses during the general election. So the RNC was taking money from all kinds of folks, and they were actually printing their own. Like, it's crazy. There's like two alternate. If you look at like Trump, even bumper stickers. There's two different designs for Trump bumper stickers. One is printed by the RNC. One was printed by Trump himself. It was like two separate campaigns were going on, which is basically a reflection of the schism between Trump and the actual Republican Party. There was no harmony there. So if you're talking about like them taking money from all kinds of yeah, the RNC absolutely were. Trump,
it was Trump too.
No, and I have no doubt that Trump took money from corporate donors and so forth in the general election, although he took considerably, honestly, not a whole lot in the general election because most of them were too busy donating to Hillary. I mean, that's a fact. You don't amass that massive sum of wealth throughout the general election and then just send it over to Trump as well. What was the final total? Like, Trump had 100 to 200 million. I even forget what the final number was, but Hillary was well past 400.
Which makes it even more pathetic now that he's completely doing the bidding of the establishment. Wouldn't you agree?
I would if I agreed with your hypothesis, which I don't. I think.
All right.
Makes the appointments.
So hold on, we're gonna change gears here. We could probably this could probably go on all night if I didn't stop it.
Yeah, that's they did kind of go on. So who kind of won on that point? Well, I think Kyle was out fact checked. Like, he wins the fact check battle, but I'm not gonna base debate solely on fact checking. But here's the thing: they were debating heavily on that, so it's hard not to do fact checking to as a contributing factor. But um, I'd honestly just have to say that I'm gonna give it to Razorfist just on just so many of Kyle's misrepresentations of his own content. Um, and most of it was just like, you agree with this, you don't agree with that, or it's just, I don't know. To be honest, I'm just gonna call it even. Because at the end of the day, it's like you have to ask yourself this: what did anybody really contribute to the discussion? And you know who are the definitive facts and logic going to sway? And it's just absolutely nobody. So we're calling that even, just like we're calling the first part even though I just feel like Kyle is just doing a nasty misrepresentation, just nasty debate tactics with his own material, consistently misrepresenting what he's already said. But I'm not going to go by that, so right now, just dead even with both of them. So let's move on, see if we can get something out of this, because we're not getting a lot. Let's just, just a lot of partisan bad mouthing, talking past each other, etc.
Yeah. We're going to change gears here to gun control. And this one's going to Kyle first for 5 minutes. Is gun control a solution to America's high rate of gun violence? And if so, to what extent?
Okay, so first of all, on this one, we're going to have to separate what my personal opinion is from what the objective answer is to that question. Because when it comes to my personal take on this issue, let me just lay out real quick what I would be in favor of. I'm a relative moderate on this issue. So what that means is I agree with 93% of the American people when they say, hey, let's do a universal background check. I agree with 60%.
Now, again, you're going to hear Kyle just float out these numbers, no references. Like the 93% thing, once again, I have no way of knowing anything about where that number comes from unless I just Google search 93%. So it's like, once again, we're continuing with this pattern of numbers, but no references. Just throwing out statistics, hope they stick, in a constant gish gallop. And it's just, it doesn't serve debates well. So let's move on.
Percent of the American people when they say, let's ban high-capacity magazines. Outside of that, I'm in favor of basically treating guns like cars. So you have a permitting system, you have registration, you have tests, you have waiting periods are important too, because like in the case of Dylan Roof, for example, they didn't complete the background check and then they decided to sell him the gun anyway because they needed another day to finish it. So if we had a little bit of a longer waiting period, that would have been 100% crucial in that situation. So that's basically my take on what I think we should do. But now to your question of is it effective or not? Not only is it effective, it would obviously be significantly more effective if we went further than my moderate ass and what I'm in favor of. So in order to make my point here, I have a meta-analysis from the Harvard Injury Control Research Center. And a meta-analysis takes all the peer-reviewed studies on this issue, and they look at them and they tell you the conclusion. And here's what they found. This is their words, not mine. Quote, where there are more guns, there is more homicide. Our review of the academic literature found that a broad array of evidence indicates that gun availability is a risk factor for homicide, both in the United States and across high-income countries. Case control studies, ecological time series, and cross-sectional studies indicate that in homes, cities, states, and regions in the U.S. where there are more guns, both men and women are at a higher risk for more homicide, particularly firearm homicide. So where they're saying where there's more guns, there's more gun violence, and there's more gun deaths. Now, again, I'm not in favor of banning guns. That's just my personal take on it. But the question of if you do that, would there be fewer gun deaths? The answer is no shit. And you could look at Japan to prove your case. Japan has like no gun deaths a year. If there's 5 It's a fucking scandal. Meanwhile, in the U.S., we have 33,000 gun deaths. Over 10,000 of them are homicides.
Yeah, this is...
All right, so Razor, I'm going to now give it to you for 5 minutes, or whatever amount of time you need.
Yeah, if the argument is more guns equals more crime, someone's going to have to explain to me why gun ownership is currently...
No. More gun deaths. More guns equals more gun deaths. Not more crime. More gun deaths.
Yeah, and there's where you get into gun death statistics invariably include suicides, which is a very important metric.
Well, no, but I just...
No, 62% of all gun deaths, 62% of all gun deaths are suicides.
So he's misstating what I said. That's why I'm correcting him.
Well, you're gonna have to wait until he's done to correct him.
So let him misstate it.
Yep. No, go right ahead and
okay. So this will be quick.
So I'm just gonna reset the counter here.
32.
And let's give you guys a moment to clarify before we proceed with Razor's thing.
There's over 32, or even depending on the year, over 33,000 gun deaths in America. About 11,000, over 10,000 of them are homicides. So if you want to forget the 32,000 because that includes suicides, fine. We'll forget that because it includes accidents and suicides. But 10,000 or 11,000 homicides, and that's compared to like 3 in Japan.
Yeah, and
all right. So hold on. Now I'm going to go ahead and give Razorfist his say. Please, if there's any,
I'll shut up.
If there's any misconceptions or whatever, you're gonna have plenty of time to freeform discuss it at the end of his spiel.
Yeah. So as you said, 62% of all gun deaths are suicides. I think 32% are homicides. And if you want to make the argument as you made, like, fine, okay, we'll reduce even suicides by banning guns. Let's go look at the bastion of cap and ball control that is United Kingdom, where gun suicides are microscopically small. Admittedly, look, that's going to happen. There's no use denying basic facts. If you reduce the availability of guns, obviously that's going to happen. It's just 2% are committed with guns, I believe. But alternate methods, such as hanging, overdose, or suffocation, more than compensate. They jump up to 60%. Here in the States, it's like 24%. Oh, better ban rope and razor blades, Great Britain, like top 2. I mean, the second highest suicide rate in the world is found in South Korea, and they have banned guns outright. Period. Look, the regulation of firearms in this country, particularly the despotic variant found in major population centers, and incidentally murder capitals, despite all their efforts at gun control, like Chicago or Los Angeles, it's an anachronistic artifact from what is now nigh universally regarded as one of the blackest chapters in U.S. domestic policy, the Prohibition era. For all the left's efforts to arbitrarily demarcate between the two, to sort of cherry-pick which draconian pablum to overturn and which to ratify, so they can hold on to like weed or lose their legal guns at the same time, they willfully ignore the fact that the NFA piggybacked off of the Volstead Act and boasted the very same champions in Congress. The irony, of course, is that the most recent revival of the gun control debate comes in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre, which I'll go on record having looked at both cases. I think it was clearly in some way inspired by the Texas clock tower sniper of the 1960s, Charles Whitman. There's too many similarities, and the guy was old enough that he lived through it. I just have a feeling on that one. But look, not merely because they both used like high vantage points to assail their victims, it's that they both employed identical tactics. Anyone who has watched...
No, just I'm going to stop this, and yeah, I'm being Mr. Nitpick here, but just, stick to, I don't know, the facts of the debate. Don't kind of go off on your own little tangents of theories about shootings that just happen. Just stick to gun control. That's like, we don't gain anything if you're going off on tangents like that. So let's move on.
The news saw the 2 broken out windows in the hotel Stephen Paddock fired from. Both he and the clock tower sniper used 2 opposite firing zones to triangulate their targets and give themselves sort of field of fire in excess of 180 degrees. It's like a military tactic. Whitman had one firing position facing I believe the University of Texas Quad, and another facing a busy street in Austin. In both cases, they neatly laid out their backup rifles, magazines, bottled water, and the like. They both had vague motives. The similarities go on ad astra, which is why I kind of laughed my balls clean off when it suggested that armed concert goers might not have precluded the massacre or even reduced the damage. Like, Why? Because that's exactly what happened in the Texas clock tower case. As the massacre wore on, Whitman ran out of targets on the quad side, so as he shifted to the streets, civilians realized what was happening. They headed home and grabbed their rifles. Even professors on the campus returned their cars. They came back with firearms and proceeded to open up on this cat. Now, it's worth mentioning that this didn't kill Charles Whitman, but what it did do is pin him down long enough that he had to abandon one of his firing positions, so that instead of raining hot lead on a shitload of soft targets on a busy downtown street corner, he actually had to turn back toward the quad where most of his remaining targets had long since either died or bugged out. I mean, think about it. Unlike the Vegas shooter, this wall-eyed retard was a world-renowned competition-caliber military sniper, but just 14 people died in Texas. Well over 50 died in Las Vegas. Responsible gun owners played a part in that at the end of the day. And here's the thing you have to understand: like, just 11.3% of all gun crimes are committed with a legally purchased gun. That is barely 1/10. Over 40% are committed with black market weapons, and nearly equal that number were hand-me-downs from a family member or friend. What are you going to do? Ban families? Actually, I think I just gave the modern authoritarian left ideas, but it's ridiculous. You're not going to legislate the problem away. Is the fundament of it.
Are you done? All right. So if that's wrapped up, we're going to go ahead and open.
No. I need to respond.
No, I don't mean. I'm just mean if his thing is wrapped up, we can go ahead and move on to some free-form discussion on the issue of guns. Kyle, I'll let you start since Razor just spoke.
See what happens when I don't interrupt? You just gave a soliloquy.
Well, he has 5 minutes and he's free to use it as he pleases.
Oh, he did. Okay, so let me ask him a question. I won't take 17 minutes. Do more guns equal more peace? Yes or no?
It really depends on the locale you're talking about. There are areas where, yes, it absolutely equals more peace.
Okay, so here's the follow-up question to that.
All right.
Why is the U.S. already not the most peaceful?
Myriad factors: proximity to the Mexican border, the cartel war, many factors. A lot of it probably dealing with a subject I think we're going to get into later. Immigration has a bit to do with it. Lack of integration, ethnic tension, gangs.
Oh, so it's the Mexicans' fault.
No. What I'm saying is no more than any other ethnic group. It's ethnic disunity is ethnic disunity in any locale.
Okay. Well, let me just say that if more guns equals more peace, the U.S. would already be the most peaceful, and we are not. Like I described before, 33,000 gun deaths a year. That includes homicides, suicides, and accidents. About 10 or 11,000 homicides every year. If it were the case that having more guns made everything more peaceful, because as you said, hey man, the good people outnumber the bad people. So if people are armed, then they'll be able to stop the bad guy doing the shooting. Okay, well if that was the case, well then we would already have the most peaceful country and we'd have the fewest gun deaths, and we don't. And I'll close on this because I don't have much more to say on this one, but this is the situation in Australia. This is from Snopes, quote, this is what happened after 1996 when they had a giant mass shooting. 2 nationwide gun buybacks, voluntary surrenders, state gun amnesties, a ban on the importation of new automatic and semi-automatic weapons, the tightening of gun owner licensing, and the creation of uniform national standards for gun registration. Australia collected and destroyed about 650,000 firearms, a reduction which is the equivalent of like 40 million guns in the U.S. of our 300 million or so being destroyed. And in the 18 years since that mass shooting, there's been a grand total of 104 victims, 104 gun deaths. So that is what, about 3 days in the U.S. There's about 104 gun deaths every 3 days. They did gun regulation, and they've had 104 deaths in 18 years. So
hey, look,
my opinion.
I'm sorry. Are you done?
No, I'm not. My opinion is separate from the facts here because, like I said, I'm not in favor of banning guns. But the question presented to us is, hey, would that make it safer? And the answer is unquestionably yes. And I would respect your position a lot more if you said, hey, you know what, man? Look, we're going to have a relatively higher gun death rate. But I don't give a fuck. Freedom, bitch. If you said that to me, I'd say, hey, God bless. That's a reasonable opinion to have. But the thing that makes me go fucking crazy is when people try to pretend Like, no. Everybody should have guns, but then also that will make us more safe. Because that part is complete and utter horseshit, the second part of that.
No, what it ensures is that you at least have the opportunity to defend yourself in the event of a calamity. And look, if you want to talk about Australia, where, like you said, they banned guns in 1996, and the murder rate, it didn't even fall off for another half decade, and it only did so when crime rates across the world also plummeted in kind. So, I
just told you,
but they handed in their personal liberty in exchange for a 6-year late decline in crime that would have.
Well, I just want to jump in here because it's an actual interesting discussion. I kind of knew where this was going to go ahead of time, but there's just a slight confusion between the two, and I just want to get into this because, like, Kyle is citing, of course, 104 gun deaths per year or whatever in Australia since the 1996 gun buyback and gun ban. And then what Razorfist is saying is that the gun deaths have not declined. And I think there's a little bit of a confusion between a low number and a declining number. So, for example, so let's say 1996, like you had 104 gun deaths before the gun buyback, right? And then after that you get 104 continuous. The death rate was low, but it did not decline. Razorfist, however, is saying that's exactly what Razorfist would be saying, is that they did not decline. Like, there's a difference between a low rate and a declining rate. Like, for example, let's just pick some arbitrary number. Say Australia had 1,000 gun deaths in 1996. Gun buyback, then it goes down to 104 per year. Then you're talking about a declined rate. So just the difference between low number versus declining number, and that's the important distinction that I don't see a lot of people making in this debate. So let's move on.
Have occurred even if they had kept them.
I just told you 104 deaths since then.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. It coincides with a worldwide decrease overall in crime. It would have happened anyway. And it took a half decade to even happen outright. And not only that, but use of knives not only grew, but grew to a level higher than use of guns was the year they were outright banned. In 1996, the year of the Australian gun ban, gun crime was hovering at 35%, and knife crime was trailing it at less than 30%. By 2007, the rate of knife crime nearly 50%. Congrats, you exchanged one murder method for another.
That's a great point.
That is the success of Australian gun control in a nutshell.
That's a good point. It would have been a horrible mass stabbing in Las Vegas. That would have been so terrible.
Those have actually happened. Incidentally, one happened at the University of Texas, which I just mentioned. Happened, was it 2012 or 2013?
You really have no clue how silly you sound, because you totally disregard scale when you make points like that. It's like saying, hey, man, there's plenty of people who drown in the fucking bathtub every year.
Here's the thing.
What do you want, a ban bathtub?
How is there not a variable scale? How is there not a variable scale in mass shootings? They vary anywhere from 2 victims to 50. They vary by definition.
Fucking picture, if you didn't have the guns we had, there would be significantly less deaths related to it. And you're trying to pretend like that's not the case, which is silly.
I'm absolutely not pretending that it's the case at all. But I am saying that you don't really get the results you're looking for, and you just wind up forfeiting your personal liberty in the process.
All right, we are going to go momentarily to a word from our sponsor, followed by some Streamlabs. We're going to get the audience to weigh in a little on what they've seen so far, and pose questions to Razorfist or Kyle if they so desire.
Also, before that, we also have a few announcements. I want to let everyone know that down in the description below the video, there is a poll. It's a Twitter poll that you can vote on regarding the debate.
No, I just kind of want to note on Kyle's face here, he does not look pleased to be there. Like, just look at the redness. It's just, here's the thing, and this is just part of the problem that I have with Kyle and with people who think like him. And I do gotta say, this is a problem on the left. This is coming from someone on the right, so okay, you can talk to me about bias all you want. But the fact is this, is that they don't come wanting to debate. They don't come wanting to discuss. They don't come wanting to learn and exchange information. And, learn doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to be convinced of this guy's argument. No, learn just means, okay, I'm going to take your perspective. I'm curious, intellectually curious as to why you think the way you do. And yes, this is why you are wrong, but I want to know. And it just, to me, it sounds like Kyle's not interested in the exchange. Like, because you hear it just from his talking points, and it just, I mean, this isn't really a debate aspect, but just look at the difference in expression. Like, Razorfist, he looks, kind of focused and thoughtful, and, you know, and his demeanor's a little bit more relaxed, I guess. And just Kyle just does not look like he wants to be there. Like, just the way he throws his shoulders up, like after Razorfist makes a point, just like saying, okay, I give up. It's just enjoy the exchange. And I say that to everybody debating. Anybody debate. You would debate somebody online. Don't just want to go to war with somebody because they disagree. Like, enjoy the exchange of ideas, because that's what learning is about. That's what debate is about. And if you love debates as I do, it's like you'll enjoy that. And that's what I want to enjoy. And it's sad too, because that was actually a thoughtful discussion. And who do I think won that discussion? I gotta say, I gotta give it to Razorfist on one point, and that is that the difference between a declining rate versus um, a stable rate. And I don't think Kyle properly refuted that. Granted, he did point the Harvard study that said where there are more guns, there's like where there are fewer guns, there's fewer gun homicides. I'll have to look up that, because if I'm not mistaken, I think they did include suicide as a form of homicide, like self-homicide or whatever they call it. But I'm pretty sure they include suicide in that. But I'm not going to fact check him on the point that Razorfist didn't fact check him, so I'm assuming Razorfist also is willing to accept that at face value, and I'm willing to as well. But, he pointed out specific logical responses to that, such as like defending yourself and the clock tower thing, which was brilliant. I didn't understand. I thought he's just going off on like a pot smoking tangent or something. I don't, but it's I don't. Kyle came up with that great point about peer-reviewed studies. The Harvard quote. And that is a legitimate study, and you do gotta respect it. And but I just I feel like Kyle kind of trailed off after that. He went into the general, like, do you would the U.S. be the most peaceful if they had the most guns? And I don't think that was necessarily part of the discussion. I think the framing was more about gun deaths, not general peace. So I gotta give a slight edge to Razorfist on this. So let's move on.
Also, link in the description, DP On Demand, 15% off. Go there. The new episode of Ask the Kirks is up and available for you to view. And for all of our patrons, our private show is occurring this Saturday. If you're not a patron already, you can become one now and still see it. Also, don't forget to like the stream and subscribe to our channel. That helps out a lot. Thanks. And we'll be right back in like 60 seconds.
Okay, let's hope we don't gotta wait that, because we will skip through that.
Okay. Good people spots the bended drum forward that has
skip through advertisements.
We are back. And I'll go ahead and open up Streamlabs. If you want to send in a comment or question, or just,
whatever
if
you
wanna,
want.
Yeah, if you want to in our direction, then here's your chance.
Are traps gay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Have
did a
fun with
detailed
that.
answer to that, by the way, on my channel in the Q&A.
Good. So if any, don't bother asking that because Kyle has already answered it in fucking detail. I'm gonna step out for a moment, Ben. I'm gonna let you take control of the Streamlabs here for a second, and I'm gonna be right back. I just have to get a drink and some stuff.
More akin to dull open palm, your tired Dennis Miller shtick. What does it say? I'm having trouble reading because it's so small on my screen. Oh, penchant for sucking Trump's Cheeto chode and wannabe Henry Rollins getup coalesce the suck. I missed the rest of it because I had to stretch out my screen. It was too small.
Alright, so is this the end of the debate?
Hey, wait, that really hurts being compared to one of my primary inspirations. It hurts really hard. Who the fuck do you get confused with? The night manager at Denny's? Blimey.
Kyle, you disregarding the fact that the gun deaths were already low before the ban. Mass shootings were already low, and the gun deaths in Australia was trending downward to a constant rate.
But every other country then. So, okay, Japan. You know, you go down.
Alright, now first of all, Kyle didn't answer the point. That's a huge problem right there. Like, you know, I could understand if Kyle said, okay, you're wrong, here's the statistics. The gun rate did go down. But no, he just went past it. Okay, just name drop countries. You know, that's not how you debate it. So let's hear.
On the list.
Okay.
I'm a sell out to Big Seltzer, guys.
Kyle Brovzlovsky.
Unfortunately, I'm out of seltzer at the moment. I could really go for some.
So, Razorfist, how do you feel about Linda McMahon being in Trump's cabinet? Did you like that one?
No comment. Yeah, I have no idea what that one was about. I think it was mainly because she's tried to run for Senate twice, and like a genius, she decided to run as a Republican in Connecticut.
I want to respond to this one here.
Okay.
Okay, so I assume everybody's reading it who's listening, so I won't bother reading it. But that's actually a good point. So why are we not going third party, and why are you trying to stay within the party? Well, the answer is close primaries, and because the system is basically rigged against third parties. So you have to take over one of the parties with your ideology.
We're going to
as opposed
skip
to trying
to see if we can get to
the
more
point with
debates.
Chicago,
Chicago, market, or taken from a friend, or
is it condition?
Okay.
There are not that. You might have
So
a point
we're
with
gonna
gun rate. Yeah,
find
Because they're
about
not
night
really
casualties.
exchanging
I want
ideas here, so we're going to
That
go
probably
to
good
more
chance.
formal
Yeah.
debates.
Are fine with it. Some that make you more. Yep.
Raw
entrance is bad.
with like homicide,
That 3,000.
Kyle, and
yeah,
there you
Okay, is this all this whole thing's going to be?
No, it just
This
means
person
that-
here wants to know if Switzerland's low homicide rate and their high gun ownership rate means that the gun problem is more of a culture problem rather than a gun problem.
There's certainly an aspect of it that's a culture problem, but I think it's silly to deny the other part of it, which is definitely just the availability of the gun.
Okay, so
It's
I
a-
think
And
right
what do you mean?
here-
It's been a big issue for the last on.
That is what they mean.
So go
right.
ahead and turn those off, Ben.
It's
We're going
off.
to go ahead and get on with this debate here. We have
All right, good
this is a
stuff.
very big issue. It's been a big issue for the last year or so, ever since Trump made it a big issue on his campaign trail. I would say the key issue of the Trump campaign, really. And this one's going to Razor first. Should the wall be built, and how do you assess the issue of immigration in America? I was going to limit that just to Mexican and South American immigration, but you can just talk about immigration in general, including the refugee and the Muslim ban or whatever you want to get into pertaining to that issue. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Razor in 5, 4, 2.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I consider the wall kind of immaterial, more of a ceremonial centerpiece that is much less important than the multi-pronged approach to added immigration enforcement in general. And that's just to enforce the laws we already have, mind you. That's not even making any new ones. Like, to me, untrammeled and even misguidedly regulated illegal immigration, a la the DREAM Act or DACA, has, over the past half-century, generated more misery, monetary crises, even outright death across both sides of the border. And here's the part the left don't like to talk about. Both sides of the border. is where this occurs than any of this kind of poison-palmed largesse that was actually intended to ameliorate the problem to begin with. Look, this is my issue with the progressive position on immigration. They're fully erect to the prospect of throwing money at the problem, but actually rolling up their sleeves and addressing the issue on the ground, like, not so much. Like, hell, even Habitat for Humanity, you know, Jimmy Carter, I'm surprised he hasn't dislocated his own shoulder, patting himself on the back for founding that one. Does the vast majority of his work not in the United States, actually, and in other South American nations, not in Mexico. And the reason why is simple. When you actually kind of plant your ass on a plane and get down there, you realize illegal immigration ain't working out for Mexico any better than it is for us. Like, I don't see how Jimmy Carter could maintain his present position on illegal immigration while standing in front of a shantytown built on, you know, they're building their houses out of fallen down billboards on literal mountains of trash in the feedback loop of misery that his policies objectively help to create. I mean, it's bad enough in the States where, according to Pew Research and the Center for Immigration Studies, well over half of all illegal immigrants are on government welfare, and an even higher percentage are on food stamps, all while paying no income tax, mind you, the vast majority of them, because they are usually paid under the table as farm hands, construction workers, and the like. But by all means, like, to bring it back to Mexico and the Mexican side of the border, which is the one no one wants to talk about, the Mexican government is corrupt. Period. You don't have drug cartels putting out hits on police chiefs and even mayors and actually carrying out the hits without anything resembling reprisal, without someone being on the take. Mexico requires either a revolution or a reform so radical it could easily be mistaken for one, which is why endlessly corrupt Mexican politicians like the avowed never-Trumper Vicente Fox have continually used the border with Mexico as a kind of political pressure release valve. In any country that bordered one that, unlike us, actually enforced its immigration law, it would have happened already, because every assassination, every warehouse, I mean, that turns up with dismembered torsos of civilians who spoke out against the Zetas or some other cartel, the pressure would build and build, and eventually it would just explode. But with the happy relationship between corrupt Mexican officials and previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat for the record, every time that pressure would build, every time a mass hanging would be orchestrated to terrify a local populace into submission, instead of building that pressure, they just popped the lid on that U.S.-Mexico border, and like steam escaping from a chamber pot, revolution was immediately averted. Or reform. Again, that's the preferable one. I mean, if the left, as they so often love to do, want to make it a humanitarian issue, I say by all means, let's make it a humanitarian issue. Because for every one family that's able to escape the crushing cartel violence and live in, let's be honest, an elevated form of poverty as an under-the-table wage slave in the United States, how many families lacking the means to depart have to remain in Mexico in mounting violence and instability, and how much does each illegal immigration deepen the omnipresent misery? I mean, I've been there. I volunteered. The left are absolutely right. They're amazing and generous, hardworking people. When I went there in 2001, there was violence in the streets. Fast forward to 2017, there's violence everywhere. City Hall, assassinated policemen, politicians, police chiefs. A half century of unchecked illegal immigration helped ensure that will never change. I mean, if you voted for Obama, if you voted for Bush, Clinton, Reagan, pat yourself on the back. You kind of helped that to happen. If you want to help Mexico, you have to stop playing kingmaker. You have to stop confusing the government with a philanthropic organization, enforce the laws that are already on the books, slam shut the border for a bit, and let Mexico turn themselves. I'm sorry, am I running afoul of the time limit?
No, 30 seconds. You got it.
Okay. And you kind of have to let Mexico turn themselves into the great nation their surfeit of natural gas, mining, and farming reserves should have allowed them to be a long time ago if they hadn't been slave to the will of tin horn robber barons. So, sorry, I'll wrap it up on that one.
Kyle, same question. It's about the wall. It's about immigration. You can continue on just the Mexican and
Sure.
South American immigration, or you can bring in the other immigration issues that are sort of paramount right now as well, if you wish.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, I think it sounds like you have more of an issue with the drug war than anything else, but we can put that aside and talk about that later when I'm done with my spiel here. And if that indeed is the case, then we have a lot more agreement than disagreement. But I might surprise everybody a little bit here, except maybe TJ, because I think I said this to you one of the times I was on DP the last time, maybe 2 times ago or something. On the issue of the wall, I am just massively indifferent because it is just symbolic bullshit. That's all it is. It's not going to make anything safer. It's not going to make anything less safe. It's just a wall. It's just the same as a fucking fence between you and your neighbor. That's all it is. So I do find it a little silly when people on the left act like it's such an egregious thing, but I also find it silly when people on the right act like it is, it's an important thing that's really that's really going to make a difference. So, I'm just utterly indifferent towards it. If I'm president, I wouldn't actively I wouldn't build it, but I wouldn't care if it was built. It's just whatever. But okay, anyway, that's the wall. To the broader question of immigration. This is one where I'm not totally agnostic. On the question of immigration, there are a lot of inconvenient facts that I think the right likes to pretty much ignore. So this is an article from The Hill from last year. They said, quote, immigrants commit crimes and are incarcerated at a much lower rate than U.S. citizens, according to two separate studies released this week. A study by the Sentencing Project, a criminal justice research and advocacy group, found that foreign-born residents of the United States commit crime less often than native-born citizens. And then there was another study by the Libertarian Cato Institute, which compares incarceration rates by migratory status, ethnicity, and gender. And they say, quote, all immigrants are less likely to be incarcerated than natives relative to their shares of the population. Among people aged 18 to 54, 1.53% of natives are incarcerated, as are 0.85% of undocumented immigrants and 0.47% of documented immigrants.
Okay, now let me just clear something up real quick, and I want to give Razorfist a chance to refute some of this. I don't want to play ultra, nitpick against Kyle here, but I just want to, just kind of, there's a difference between crime and incarceration and conviction. So, like, what Kyle here is talking about is the incarceration rate of immigrants, and of course, there's a lot that goes into that, but basically, for example, and you'll probably even hear this from Razor, it's like when you commit a crime as an illegal immigrant, you'll get thrown in jail and then you'll get deported for committing a crime if it's serious enough. I just want to let people know that difference. Like crime, like actively committing something that is a crime versus being charged and convicted and imprisoned for that crime. It's just a different thing. So let's let Kyle go on here.
According to the Cato study of comparative incarceration rates. So that's point number one, is that they actually commit less crime. Now, the Pew Research Center in 2014 also found the following, quote, more Mexicans are leaving than coming to the U.S. So there's a net loss of 140,000 immigrants coming from Mexico and South America. A loss of 140,000 from 2009 to 2014. Now, I admittedly don't know the updated statistics on that. I haven't seen any articles on that. But for 2009 to 2014, a net loss of 140,000. And then two other quick facts. I don't know how much more time I have, but I'll try to make it brief.
2 minutes.
Okay, then I got plenty of time. PolitiFact found the following, quote, undocumented immigrants pay $12 billion of taxes every single year in state and local taxes. And then CNN Money, quote, undocumented immigrants do not qualify for welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, and most other public benefits. Most of these programs require proof of legal immigration status, and under the 1996 welfare law, even legal immigrants cannot receive these benefits until they have been in the United States for more than 5 years. So my main contention is this. Most of the people flipping out about immigrants that comes from the right, basically what happened is they're chumps, and they've fallen for the oldest trick in the book. What elites do is they scapegoat immigrants for your problems so that you don't blame elites. It's getting people who are on the middle of the economic ladder to look at the people below them on the economic ladder and blame them for all their problems. And that's my contention, is that it's basically a total red herring by elites to try to make middle-class people think the people they really hate are poor immigrants and not them. And that's it.
All right, I'm going to open it up for some free-form discussion there. Razor, you go ahead and start.
Well, at the end of the day, crime is really immaterial. Like, I've never really argued, and I don't really fall down on the side of the argument of, oh, they're coming here to murder everyone. Yeah, you'll have the odd outlier where it's, oh, this guy kills this guy. But usually you're talking about somebody who is an illegal immigrant in the sense that it's like a cartel operative who jumped the border and obviously had to illegally and what. And to me, I concede the left's point that those are outliers, right? To me, crime is not the operative issue. The issue is the caustic effect on our neighborhoods. The caustic effect. I mean, you cannot go to border towns, San Antonio. You can't go to Tucson, South Tucson, even South Phoenix. Phoenix isn't even a border town. You know, we're several hours north of the border, and even there, the closer you get to the border, the worse it gets. And it is kind of a it comes with the low economic circumstances that a lot of illegal aliens come from. And of course, that trickles down into everything, and you wind up paying for that one way or another. I would also add, you know, citing that article about, well, illegal aliens don't qualify for welfare. Well, yes, of course they don't, until they steal someone's identity. Do you think it's coincidental that the higher illegal aliens and illegal immigration spikes, identity theft also goes up? They steal other people's social security numbers. It happens all the time.
But I think it's an absolute minute, tiny drop in the bucket compared to any other problem we would point to.
No, just look at the case with Target a few years ago. The woman who was skimming credit cards at Target, this was a big story. It stole a bunch of people's financial information. Woman turned out to be an illegal alien who was selling people's information to other illegal aliens. It was part of an identity theft ring. So illegal immigration and identity theft, they are forever linked. There's clearly a connection there. And
yeah, but don't you think, like, what percentage though?
Identity, or they won't even steal someone's social security number. Sometimes they'll just pluck it from thin air. Like, I had a friend who had a social security number. I won't reveal it, obviously, but it was really like easy to pluck from.
What was that
air.
number again?
I know, right? It was really easy to like just think of it, you know, like pluck a number from thin air and it would be that number. And they had like something like 25, 30 different people, all illegal immigrants, and they were all using their social security number. You know,
but I don't
already invested in welfare. They'd already invested in food stamps.
But what percentage? This is like we're discussing a non-problem, because 99 point however many percent of undocumented immigrants are literally here to try to make a better life for themselves and their families.
No, and I agree that's their core motivation. But in order to actually invest in regular government services, sometimes to do basic things, they have to have some kind of documentation, and so they wind up going to these identity theft rings, or getting in touch with someone who has.
You're almost making a case for amnesty, though, because the solution to that would be amnesty.
Well, it would be if at the end of the day that wasn't going to hurt our neighborhoods even more. Because this,
okay,
again,
I don't know what that means. What does that mean when you say it hurts our neighborhoods? I genuinely don't know what that means. If you said crime's not an issue, you said that.
Well, look, you're talking to someone who grew up in South Phoenix. I witnessed there was a freeway being completed when I was growing up that connected us sort of circuitously to Tucson, and when that was completed, within 4 years, the neighborhood went completely downhill. It got to the point where the woman across the street, behaving kind of oddly, we wind up moving, right? Because it got so bad. There were literal standoffs with police with the woman across the street.
I'd like to hear some more
concrete
stuff.
And we're watching the news one day in the new neighborhood, and the woman's been gassed out of her house after a standoff with police. Turned out she was running drugs and illegal aliens across the border.
Okay, but again, so this goes back to the main point that we agree on, though, which is the problem is the drug war. It's not the undocumented immigration.
But this person was running illegal immigrants as well. So you're kind of cherry picking which one you say is wrong. She had an entire. They actually did an entire multi-part news special on it where they went through her house and saw all the compartments where the illegals would hole up and so forth. It goes hand in hand. You have to understand, like, illegal immigration, and I mean, a lot of these people are actually brought in by people who are in some way connected with cartels. Coyotes a lot of times have connections with cartels.
But when you say, like, the quality of your neighborhood goes down, if you also admit, as you did, that crime is a relatively tiny issue, then I don't see how you can make the connection between the illegal immigration or undocumented immigration and your neighborhood going to shit. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
If you admit the first thing,
look.
I don't know how the second thing logically follows. Crime's not that big of an issue.
Simple. Simple. Property values, you would agree, are affected by school performance?
Yeah, but property value, that they make that argument with homeless people too. Like, oh, you're not allowed to feed homeless people here because property value.
Okay,
like,
and that's lovely, but that has
those
nothing,
people need to fucking eat.
That's lovely, but that's ultimately immaterial to the argument. If
no, it's
the
not.
quality
It's
of
exactly
schools,
material to it.
No, look, if the quality of schools affects property values, if it affects everything around it, you're winding up integrating, or rather not integrating, an entire segment of the population that has English as a second language, if they have it as a language at all. Like, look, immigration was intended originally to have peaks and valleys. If we rendered, like, legal immigration levels as an audiograph over the years, the most productive generations, the Industrial Revolution, World War II, and the like, they'd be represented by brief spikes, followed by a lull. And then a few years later, they'd allow another spike, then another lull. Instead, ever since the enactment of Ted Kennedy's Immigration Act of the 1960s, like, it's been one long, perpetual Black Sabbath being produced by Rick Rubin audio spike, that hasn't calmed one iota in the intervening decades. The operative logic was that they were supposed to be giving each generation of immigrants time to coalesce, to integrate, in lieu of just throwing 9 tetrillion disparate ingredients into a fondue pot and pretending we just made chili. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to solve an awful lot of ethnic tension, I think hamstringing or overturning the 1965 Immigration Act is probably step uno. You need to give these populations time to integrate, and then you need to throw open the borders again, and then shut them for a while.
Okay, so first of all,
can we talk about the refugee and the travel ban stuff a little bit?
I'll bring that up. I'll bring that up in a second.
Okay, now, let me just go over this segment. It's basically, here's the thing. Like, when you're talking about this stuff, I think Razorfist pretty much put the burden of proof on himself when he said that we need to more heavily regulate immigration, and therefore you have to present a case to Kyle and to the audience as to why that's the case. And I think he did okay in his opening segment. He cited the Center of Immigration Studies, which is a disputed study, but Kyle didn't dispute it, so, that's the way I look at that. But then it's like, as the debate went on, he kind of left that, and then he tried to go into philosophical stuff and muddy waters anecdotes. I grew up, the woman across my street, the freeway that I made in the neighborhood that I live in. It's irrelevant. And those are actual immaterial things. And he miserably failed at his burden of proof. Like if you were him, the best thing you can do in an immigration argument, is, like, you don't want to assume the burden of proof. You want to say, okay, for example, in Razorfist's case, you want to put that burden on Kyle to say, like, okay, why do immigrants need to come across the border? But instead, he put forth his thesis and he failed. So this is one part with a clear, distinct winner, and Kyle pretty much wins this by Razorfist putting a burden that he could not come close to satisfying. So let's move on.
But to address your point, is integration preferable to having immigrants come in the country and then them living in segregated pockets? I 100% agree with you that integration is preferable to people living in segregated pockets. But there's still a broader problem, though, with the economic argument that you're making, because fundamentally, when you bring up the property value and shit, that's a fundamental economic argument. And the problem with that is Alabama actually implemented the toughest immigration law in the U.S. in, I think it was 2010 or 2011. And what happened is it was on the books for, I think, 7 months, and then they said, fuck this, we got to get rid of it, because their economy suffered gigantically. In fact, there were all these issues where because they had to like check everybody's papers when they pulled them over, and it was very draconian, and it was basically a version of self-deportation where they make the conditions so shitty for undocumented immigrants that they want to leave. And what happened is they first of all they pissed off the business community because there were some immigrants who were business owners who were trying to open plants there, and they gave them a hard time, and that was a problem. But then furthermore, all the farming that goes on, all the industrial work, they found that you didn't have people to replace the undocumented immigrants. So they had this really, really strict anti-immigration law, and then they got rid of it, and they were like, we can't have that because it fucks up our economy. So I think the net benefits of having immigrants is so much more than the negatives. And then to address what TJ wants us to talk about here, yeah, the travel ban, it just strikes me, it's a non-issue because we already have sufficient laws. So, for example, when it comes to refugees, okay, we take relatively so few refugees compared to the rest of the modern world. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think it's not a bigoted conversation to say, hey, how many refugees should we take? Like, there's a line, like, how many should we take? How many can we handle? You know, like, how is this workable? But the refugees we take, literally over 80% of them that come from the Middle East, and I think in this case specifically Syria, are women and children. So you're not talking about something that's a security risk. And then furthermore, I love how Trump always said during the campaign, extreme vetting, we have to do extreme vetting, extreme. But here's the problem with that. Hey, asshole, we already fucking do it. The U.S. has the most rigorous, strict vetting process in existence in the modern world. We have multiple different government agencies involved. We have something called biometric screening. They go through government records from other fucking countries. I mean, we're talking about it takes on average about a year before a refugee gets into this country. So basically the point is we already have extreme vetting, and the people who we're letting in are overwhelmingly women and children. So the idea of like doing a Trump style, like he said on the campaign trail, a total and complete shutdown of Muslims, that's just stupid. Like, you're just an idiot if you make that point.
Razor.
We're talking about a situation born from something that is just momentary necessity. The refugee crisis is just that, it's a crisis. If it's ephemeral, then who really cares? If you're momentarily reducing the amount of Middle Eastern immigration, he's just taking the same privilege people like every president throughout history took. Like I said, there used to be peaks and valleys in immigration. I do not see the problem with saying, hey, there's a lot of crap going on in this region of the world. Maybe we don't want to bring in that many people from over there, especially when they're places where we're bombing. It's not terribly wise to bomb the ever-living shit out of Syria and then say, hey, let's take in a bunch of Syria's population. A lot of
even given the
majority of them don't have the same kind of culture, the same religion, beliefs, social beliefs, and so forth already. That's already a fairly insurmountable hurdle. And now we've just dropped drone strikes on their heads as well. That's not exactly a recipe for civic harmony.
Even given what I told you here, that it's 80% women and children, and that they have to wait a year on average before they get in here, and that there's rigorous background checks, even then you say people who are starving in the middle of a fucking civil war, we shouldn't let in to give a chance at a better life?
Have you seen some of the live footage of the women and children on the borders of France and Germany?
No. That's a bullshit argument because we're not France. We're not France. We're not Europe. They have much weaker immigration, and you could say they're wrong for that, and I'd agree with you. I just told you ours is a rigorous system. So the question is, with the system we have in place right now, is it wrong to say, hey, you know what, maybe some people from Syria...
Look, to agree with your premise, we have to agree that it's rigorous, and you have yet to establish that fact.
No, but it is a fact, and I described it. You could reject it, but you would be incorrect in rejecting it. You would be factually wrong.
Now, Kyle has not established it, so Razorfist is correct here, and Kyle's pretty much... see, this is the problem, and, I didn't want to interrupt here because I don't want to nitpick Kyle, but a lot of it's like what he says, weasel words. The word extreme, the word rigorous. What does that mean? What's a firm definition of that word? And, I think what Razorfist was wanting from Kyle was kind of him to elaborate on that definition, and I don't think, Kyle just speaking dismissively, if you say it's not rigorous, you're wrong, just explain how, what process? Like, you can go through the 2 year waiting period. You can go through the specifics. There's a lot of specifics in the process, and a lot of them are publicly known. Just go through them and debate them. So Kyle is doing another disservice. Just being dismissive, all that. So let's move on.
If your argument is that our immigration system is rigorous because
No,
people have
refugee
to wait a while,
vetting system, I said. Refugee vetting system.
okay, what does it entail?
I just told you, multiple different government agencies are involved. They do biometric screening. You have, it's a year on average before they can get in here. It's very rigorous.
There is no Ellis Island. Like, it's not even as rigorous as Ellis Island.
So, in other words, you're just going to deny the fact I said by
I
being
absolutely deny that it is difficult to emigrate here. I will,
okay, you're changing the conversation. I said refugee vetting. You keep saying immigration. I'm not saying immigration. I'm saying refugee vetting.
Well, especially when, for example, if it took over a year,
Kyle's right.
The Syrian refugee crisis has been going on around that about that long
in Europe.
Obama, I know, but we've been taking in refugees that long. Obama put those refugees on the fast track to come in here, so clearly he didn't take a year.
Okay, you are playing quick and loose with the facts. So first of all, Europe, you're right. Europe has a refugee crisis. They have a refugee crisis because they don't have the same kind of rigorous vetting system that we have here. We do have that system. The debate that we're having as to how many refugees to let in, it ranges between 0 and at the very most 100,000, but most liberals are for 50,000. Okay, places like Germany have taken in millions, bitch. So with you, 50,000 fucking highly vetted women and children, that's stupid. That's an idiotic.
Highly vetted, bearded women and children. You're absolutely correct.
Again, you're making that up. You're totally making that up.
Yeah, no, and I'm making up all the camera footage of the refugees with beards
that
are clearly pretending to be women and children. I'm absolutely, and I'm sure Obama was really impelled to vet those refugees when he didn't even take the year you claimed that he took. Because he absolutely shipped in several thousand refugees. If he was taking a year, he didn't even have a year to vet them. So where did that come from?
Dude, what are you babbling about? Listen, that's the law. The refugee vetting process, it takes about a year on average. And if you don't believe me, TJ, give me a fact check, because I guarantee you that's the case. I've covered the article 13 fucking times in 13 different segments. So if your strategy is to sit there and deny the objective reality of the situation of our refugee vetting process, then you are losing probably even in your own mind, even though you won't admit it.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the thing. Your metric was we wait a year to vet them, correct?
No, it's not waiting a year to vet them. It's the process of vetting them takes a year.
Exactly. So if we are vetting them properly, then we shouldn't have seen these refugees until now, correct? Because it's a year later.
Dude.
Do I have to explain the concept of time to you?
What are you saying? You sound ridiculous. I don't even understand what you're saying. You're saying because I saw a fucking video of people coming over on a boat and it hadn't even been a year since that was... Dude, that law, the extreme vetting that Trump wants so dearly, that's been the law since like 2010 or something. It's been for a long time.
No, see, here's the problem. And pretty much, Razorfist is just... He is being a little bit ridiculous here because... this is about the refugee crisis in the U.S., versus the U.S. Whether it's in the U.S. is debatable. Well, versus, and see, Razorfist is talking about bearded women and children. Now, I'm not sure if, he's referring to Europe or the United States, but number one, either way, it's an anecdote, like, pictures of bearded men. Okay, say if they're in the U.S., all right? Now, what Kyle is saying here, I'm not going to fact check. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to, because I can't fact check it right now. But he's saying 80% are women and children. I don't know if that's the case or not, but the fact is, saying, oh, refugees on a boat, bearded refugees on a boat, it does nothing. Say bearded women and children. It's just like, just refute the argument, dude. That's the problem. It's like, Razorfist is pretty much throwing this whole thing away. Let's just put it to put it mildly. Let's move on.
The law. And I don't understand. Look, his idea of what extreme vetting is fairly vague and amorphous anyways. He hasn't even spelled out exactly what it is. So
Yeah, a total and complete shutdown of Muslims. Now, of course, he's had to back off that because he's run into constitutional problems with that. But that was his idea on the campaign trail. A, quote, total and complete shutdown of Muslims.
No, a quote, total and complete shutdown of immigration from the Middle East, from countries namely that we're bombing.
Of Muslims. He said Muslims. In the speech, he said Muslims.
Yep, Kyle's right.
Shutdown of Muslims.
Oh my goodness. Are you
See, I just don't understand how you can cherry pick that when on other occasions he said Middle East.
Oh my goodness.
No, exactly, and so am I. Here's the thing.
Train wreck.
You're going to make me pull up his website and read you the quote. And then you're still going to go, yeah, but on another time he said this.
Because that's my entire point. He said two different things. I just said at the beginning of this entire debate that Trump can be amorphous on his positions, did I not?
Right, he can be a contradictory hypocrite is another way of saying that. That's true.
So in other words, he's a politician, which you would defend if there was a D next to his name. Right.
Actually, that is completely preposterous because I spent the entire fucking primary and general election shitting on Hillary Clinton. So you should probably learn a thing or two about my show before you say such ridiculous.
Well, this is devolving, but you kind of got to blame Razorfist for this. I don't understand where, just Trump said total and complete shutdown of Muslims. That is what he said. Muslims entering the United States. Now that's the full context of his quote. You could accuse Kyle of being a little bit out of context here, but he said it, It's okay, he said it. Like, that is what he said. Yeah, you could say, okay, he said this at one time, this at another time. But, yeah, he said Muslims. That's what, and I just feel like Razorfist is trying to... I don't know what he's trying to do. It's just, he's not into it right now, I guess. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, just and Razorfist has done this a couple other times, just like with the Republican thing, it's okay to state a fact, even if the fact is a little bit inconvenient, even if the fact, just state the fact. That's all you can ask for in a debate, so let's move on.
Ridiculous things.
That was not.
I knew this one was going to be gold, dude. I knew this was
the fact that he thinks I'm a defender of any Democrat when I literally co-founded an organization to primary the Democratic Party is like.
By the way, Kyle, you've twice made you twice try to get me to fact check. This is kind of the first debate we've done in a while. In the future, I will have a fact checker on stand. Well, I didn't arrange for that this time, so I'm sorry.
I can tweet out the articles. I remember the first.
People will have to be their own fact checkers on this one.
I'll tweet them out when this is over. I remember the one I brought up was about the refugee vetting. I don't remember the other thing I said I wanted to fact check on though.
Neither do I. Sorry.
I just pulled up the government website for this, and it says the total processing time varies depending on the applicant's location and other circumstances, but the average time from the initial UNHCR referral to arrival as a refugee in the United States is about 18 to 24 months.
So that's longer than a year.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on. I don't think we need to actually do... I was going to do something about the Electoral College, but who honestly gives a shit? I think we're just going to move on to the single-payer issue. Do you support single-payer what the fuck's wrong with me? Single-payer healthcare system. We're going to start with Kyle on that one. Give you 5 minutes.
Shocker. Everybody in the audience is going to be completely stunned to find out I do. All right, so let me run through my arguments, and then we'll let him say silly things. According to a brand new poll that came out this month, Associated Press NORC poll from this year, 62% of Americans support Medicare for all. There's even a poll where there's more Republicans that support Medicare for all than don't. Now, Medicare for all, one of the first things Republicans say when they talk against it is that, it's too expensive, we can't afford it. Too expensive, can't afford it. Too expensive, can't afford it. You know what? It is expensive. It costs over 10 years. It will cost $32 trillion. That's a lot of money. But here's the problem: if we didn't do Medicare for all, the cost of our private healthcare system over that same time period would be $49 trillion. So that is a net savings of $17 trillion. Private insurance companies, when it comes to them, about 80% of your premium money, and this is their numbers, 80% of your premium money goes to actual medical care. 20% goes to overhead costs. Now, when you look at Medicare, 94% of your money that you pay into it goes to actual medical care. Just 6% goes to overhead costs. So it's significantly more efficient. Now, when you look at the studies on healthcare systems around the world, according to the World Health Organization, this is a study from 2000, so if somebody were to say it's outdated, they would be correct. But France was #1 in the world in the year 2000. The United States was ranked number 37. We spend about 16% of our GDP on healthcare. Other modern nations spend about half of that, and they cover everybody. We spend double what they spend, and we still have at least 30 million people who are uninsured. And remember how I said the World Health Organization study was outdated? I have the newer one here. This one was done by the Commonwealth Fund, and they rank the top systems in the modern world. #1, UK. 2, Australia. Netherlands, Norway, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Canada, France, and the very worst in the modern world when it comes to healthcare, United States. And then final point I'll make on this is medical bankruptcies. The United States has hundreds of thousands of medical bankruptcies every single year. Go to Canada, mention the word medical, and then the word bankruptcy, and they will laugh at you and go, that's not a thing, that doesn't exist here. People don't go broke because they have medical bills. That's not a thing in Canada, that's not a thing in Norway, that's not a thing in Denmark, that's not a thing in Iceland, that's not a thing in Sweden. We have hundreds of thousands of those in the United States. And with that, I'm done. Razor, take it away.
Yeah, look, it isn't universal health care I have an issue with. It's kind of the monolithic, authoritarian, ham-beast government has to transmogrify into in order to accommodate single-payer health care that I personally take issue with. Like, I've always kind of lived by the credo of a government large enough to give you everything you could ever want also has to be large enough to take everything away that you will ever have. And history kind of absolves that viewpoint of lapsing into mere paranoia, because when you give the government a proverbial inch, they will seize the mile, by force if necessary. That's just how it is. As I already stipulated, and I stand by it, government is at the end of the day force. It's the threat of force, if nothing else. I mean, by all means, let's look at the left's land of milk and honey, Canada, where government-subsidized healthcare is so indescribably utopian that they had to put an amendment on the law that makes it actionably illegal to obtain your own healthcare through private means. I mean, like
I don't agree with that for the record.
And waiting times, incumbent waiting times have increased in 2013, as I said, in Canada across all 12 major medical disciplines, all of them. Waiting times increased from nearly 10 weeks to 18 and a half weeks. So look, there's no such thing as a perfect healthcare where you're always going to get healthcare in any instance. Canada, whatever. This isn't me bashing Canadian healthcare for not taking care of people, because either way, you're never going to have the amount of care you actually want. But it is a value judgment. Are you going to prefer to pay more and get it quicker, or are you going to pay in your time and waiting? That's really what it comes down to. Like, I laugh until I collapse a fucking lung when the left say we need single-payer socialized medicine. Like, not to disseminate the meaning of life or anything, but we already have single-payer socialized medicine. It's called the Veterans Administration, and hey, how's that been working out lately? How many grandpa corpses did we stack up this week?
It's
like,
ranked better than
a quasi-socialist president couldn't handle a laughably minuscule microcosm of single-payer socialized medicine. Meanwhile, the Bernie bros want to unfurl that clusterfuck nationwide. Good goddamn luck with all that.
What's the most popular healthcare system in the U.S.?
Hold on, does that conclude your time, Razor?
Yeah, that's good. I'm good.
What's the most popular healthcare system in the U.S.?
Probably single-payer healthcare, because they've been sold a bill of goods.
It's Medicare. What's Medicare? Single-payer healthcare. I rest my case.
Well, and that's the thing. We allow our citizens to actually buy our own care. In Canada, that's not allowed.
No, okay. I don't agree with that. I think you should be able to buy supplemental private insurance if you so choose, but there should be a Medicare for all system. That's the baseline.
But yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's great in Canada. Like, if you want to replace a pair of glasses, like, yeah, it costs nothing. In some cases, you get what you pay for. But like I said, with all socialist legislation, it kind of comes with additional regulations and outright strictures on personal liberty. That, the Canadian people, they had to make a value judgment. They made it, but those personal liberties are never going to come back. Once the government takes authority, they never give it back.
But you do know there are different kinds of single-payer systems, right? Like the UK.
Absolutely. No. Every single-payer system is not the same.
Right, and there are many single-payer countries where you can get supplemental private insurance if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that's not true. And like I said, if Canada is your land of milk and honey, then by all means, let's look at Canada. That's what it's like. There are.
First of all, just to jump in here, it's actually a pretty decent discussion, but it's like single-payer healthcare. Excuse me. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding between really both of these people, and it's a little pet peeve, but it's single payer means government pays for all your healthcare. Government is the only payers. That is what the term single payer means. National healthcare is what Kyle is referring to for Medicare for all. So, Medicare for all, for example, you have something that covers everybody, i.e. national healthcare. But single payer extends that to Canada, which makes it illegal for you to obtain your own health insurance or have somebody else pay for your health care. The government is the means of payment. Whether you're talking about single payer for individual private entities or for government run companies, whether they be drug companies or practices, hospitals. It's single payer means there's one payer. That's what the word single means. So they're not debating single payer. They're more debating national health care. And that's where we get into a big problem of semantics. And it is just semantics, but it just, people need to be very careful to distinguish the difference between single payer, national health care, and universal health care, where the government is both the payee and the provider. Let's move on.
People who, in a lot of cases, in more severe cases particularly, have to relocate, not necessarily even to the United States, but somewhere else to get their extremely expensive procedures done, or if they feel like the system is kind of grinding its wheels, if they want to get something taken care of in a timely fashion, they have to go somewhere else,
Well,
I already kind of provided an anecdotal example earlier, but
yeah, we don't need to go over that again. But I will, I also mentioned the point that yes, everybody rations care. It's a matter of how you prioritize your rationing. They do it based on need. We do it based on the size of your wallet. So yes,
they do it based on need and
they do. That's how they do it. They do it based on need. That's exactly how they prioritize.
Yeah, and that manifests itself in waiting times, is what I mean.
And we have waiting times here too. That's my point. If you're not rich, yes, you're going to have waiting times. You won't have a waiting time if you're rich because we do wallet biopsies. We ration care based on how rich you are. So it's a matter of how you want to ration care.
Yeah,
I think it's more logical to ration it based on need.
With is rich.
Well, I just to point out a little bit of a thing on Kyle's end, and that is that the waiting times. Yeah, there are waiting times for certain things, like if you need a transplant and all that, but the implication he's making is flat incorrect. Like, it would be illegal for a hospital to base the amount of time you wait for a procedure on, what he calls a wallet biopsy. Wallet biopsy just basically says, okay, like, we have to treat you, but how are you going to pay for it? What insurance do you have? What assets do you have, and etc. What is your ability to pay? Is basically what they're talking about. This has nothing to do with the actual treatment or when you get the treatment, etc. So, Kaio's kind of playing a little bit loose with the facts there. So, let's move on.
Like really? Like I was okay. I was not covered for a while because with the profound
Yeah,
goat fuck that was
anecdotes again.
Obamacare, I didn't know the first place to start in getting health care because it was such a
We're
circuitous
probably
mire.
skipping over
So for a
this.
while I was not covered. So when I went to the doctor, I just paid out of pocket. It's like $90 for a general care practitioner. Where is this like prohibitively expensive thing coming from? I mean, anyone with a basic job, with a job.
Anytime you have to go to the hospital, that's when it happens.
That okay. Anyone with a basic job, with a job.
Anytime you have to go to the hospital, that's when it happens.
That okay. And
A
that's
general practitioner is cheap. Going to a hospital, even for something like a broken arm or something. I'm sorry, I'm not even supposed to be involved. What am I even doing?
That's all right. I have no more to say on this anyway. So.
Okay, so we have some user submitted questions.
Okay, so we're just going to end this here because there's probably no more debate, and we're not going to go through the questions about, like, whether Kyle prefers TNA or whatever the fans are asking on this show. They want to keep it entertaining. That's acceptable. Um, so, first of all, this segment, I'd have to say both kind of stayed on party lines, didn't really challenge each other, didn't press each other, didn't um, provide anything that adds anything to the debate. You had Razorfist offering the libertarian argument, um, and then you had Kyle basically offering the access arguments and all that. So this debate's a wash. But who wins this debate? It's actually kind of clear. And like, first of all, let me just comment that um, Kyle is a horrible debate partner, and I do not encourage anybody to debate this guy. He is a sleazeball, ad homineming piece of garbage at debating. Period. You go in there and then you just disparage your opponent, and then you misrepresent, you lie, you you're disrespecting his time the whole time, um, and you're just you come there with an angry attitude, just not wanting to discuss. This is not an intellectually honest person. Razorfist, on the other hand, he is a very he sounded like he sounded irritated at times, but he's more curious and willing to offer his insight, but also willing to listen. He was trying to find common ground with Kyle, and that's what you really want to do in a debate. Now saying that, who won this debate? And Razorfist just threw the debate in his second and third segments, dealing with immigration, dealing with the travel ban. It's just simple as this. Like, and really, even it goes back to the beginning, and it kind of prefaced this problem. It's just state the fact. Don't be afraid to state the fact, and don't tell us about how you feel or your anecdotes or any of that. And then when you're asked for specifics, when you put the burden of proof on yourself, give the specifics, percentages, facts. Bring up the Center for Immigration Studies again if you have to. Force Kyle to respond to it. When you come to a debate and you assume the burden of proof on a subject, you have to satisfy that burden. And when you come out incoherently as you did, especially during the refugee debate, don't expect people, me, anybody to be awarding you points for doing that. You have to come in with a coherent mindset, and if there is a point where you cannot be coherent, just let it be known, or just bring it to something you have insight on, and not just anecdotes. because when you're talking about a debate, this isn't like you with your buddies smoking a joint and going over the purpose of humanity. You have an audience. You have people who genuinely want to hear two opposing sides discuss something in a civil manner. I understand Kyle made that difficult because he's a piece of crap, but you have to do it. And Razorfist, you did not do that. I just have to be blunt. You were good on you were neutral on healthcare. You stuck to the line. You argued your case well, and it was a good case. But Kyle's also got a case, and he argued his case sticking to his party line, and there wasn't really any pressure. And then you had the conservatism versus liberal and Trump debate, which is a lot of nothing burger. And those were all neutral, but it just you know Kyle didn't win this debate. Razorfist lost the debate. Thanks for listening. God bless.